I call the meeting of the San Juan Unified School District Board of Education to order. The meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recording may capture sounds and images of those attending this meeting. The recording will be posted on the district website. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Paula Viescas, Board President, and to my right is Dr. Michael McKibben, Board Vice President. To his right is Ms. Zima Creason, Board Clerk. To her right is Ms. Pam Costa and Mr. Saul Hernandez, Board Members. To my left is Superintendent Kern, and to his left is Administrative Assistant Stephanie Cunningham. This afternoon, we're starting with a workshop regarding open enrollment, and at this point, I will turn it over to Superintendent Kern and the team.
Thank you, President Viasquez, members of the board, community members, and staff. We are going to walk you through some information, both kind of historical perspective, some of the education code information about open enrollment, and then hopefully just have a dialogue. We're going to have some stopping points in between because there's a lot of information in here. So Deputy Superintendent Bassinelli and myself will be co-presenting this, kind of going back and forth on these items. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to her. We do have other staff here to support the work as well. Dr. Calvin is here. Frank Camarda is here to assist with any questions, as well as Brian Ginter, Director overseeing our open enrollment process. So with that, Ms. Bassinelli, go ahead and take it away.
Just wait until, there we go. Okay, to start, we wanted to really ground our conversation in our why. And in considering some common assumptions around our open enrollment that have been voiced throughout the years, it really prompts us to review our open enrollment practices as a part of our equity work. So we wanted to start with our equity belief statement, which really speaks to, through policies, practices, programs, and decisions, San Juan will reduce the predictability of which students fail by utilizing an equity lens to eliminate barriers for our specific populations. Going even a little deeper into our board policy 0415 on equity, we call out that in order to eliminate institutional biases of any kind, including implicit or unintentional biases and prejudices that affect student achievement, and to eliminate disparities in educational outcomes for students from historically underserved or underrepresented populations, the district shall proactively identify class and cultural biases as well as practices, policies, and institutional barriers that negatively influence student learning, perpetuate achievement gaps, and impede equal access to opportunities for all students. So a part of this workshop, we'll be digging into some of the common assumptions, as well as what the data says, many different looks at different kinds of data. So first, to touch on some common assumptions that we hear about open enrollment. There's a lot of assumptions that the district chooses to implement open enrollment, that it's a choice. We're going to look at education code that calls out open enrollment practices in districts. Additionally, there's a common assumption that neighborhood students and families are not accessing non-boundary schools. We're going to look at some scattergrams related to our non-boundary schools to look at who is enrolled at those schools. Additionally, there are assumptions around students who speak English as a second language, identify as low income, or are from other underrepresented groups are not accessing the open enrollment process. In considering our enrollment discussion at a board meeting, a few board meetings ago, we looked at the same slide, and just as a reminder, there are many factors that impact school enrollment. One of them is boundaries or even the lack of boundaries. Additionally, facility capacity plays a role in enrollment, where we look at opportunities in our facilities as well as limitations. Grade configurations, we also took a dive into that and looked at a variety of configurations that included TK through 5th grade, some schools including 6th grade. We have K-8s, 6-8s, 9-12s. Additionally, instructional program does play a role in enrollment, and we're going to look at some of our specialized programs that we have during this presentation. And then open enrollment and transfers are also a part of the equation that impacts school enrollments.
So when we dig into what open enrollment actually is, it's the process that an individual would go through when they say, I want to go to a school other than my home school. Now, we did on the cover page, it does talk about those programs, and Ms. Basnelli alluded to those. We have 8 schools, she'll get into that a little bit later, that are non-boundaried schools. And so we have probably a much higher percentage than most schools of students that access open enrollment because they have to get into those schools. So non-boundaried public schools are a very unusual thing. And talking with some staff who have worked in other districts, they're like, yeah, that hasn't been my experience to have that. When an individual goes through the open enrollment process and gets their choice of school, that school now becomes their home school. So they've given up their rights to their previous school. So potentially, if I left my neighborhood school, I got into the open enrollment school, and that neighborhood school was also a high need school, that place could fill up if I ever wanted to go back. There's not a spot saved for me there. So it's important to realize that people do give up their rights to the home school, that becomes their home school. It's determined by lottery. And we often at times get the question, why do we only get one choice? And years ago, I used to oversee the open enrollment process, and over at La Sierra, we would have our these number of days where people would come and they'd fill out their paperwork for the sites they wanted. We'd have a big long line, and you could choose more than one school. And over a number of years, I think it was actually 3 schools, we realized that not only did no one get their third choice, but no one ever got their second choice. Because the elementary schools that were very, in high demand for choice filled up, and there was actually a waiting list behind it. So you were at your number 2 choice was, way up there on a wait list. And then people would say, well, you couldn't be on 2 wait lists. Well, okay, I want to be on the wait list of my first choice, but not my second choice. So over the years, we went, why are we giving more than one choice? No one's ever getting their second choice, and over a number of years. So we did away with that second or third choice. And I think, Brian, even looking at this, when we talk about the number of intra-district transfers, that has gone up a lot because we try and work with families if they don't get their first choice to go through that process. And so we do have wait lists. We have wait lists beyond just our non-boundaried schools. I know you asked a question, Dr. McKibben, at one of the recent board meetings about who has wait lists. And I think when we looked at it, we said just about every single school in the district has a wait list, except I think, Brian, you said one may not. And so because there may be a wait list at just a particular grade because of the neighborhoods, we obviously, some schools have significantly more wait lists than others, but across the board, there are wait lists at almost every single one of our schools. So you can go to the next slide. So if a student wants to attend a school rather than their current school, this is who would apply for open enrollment. And it is for our students that are in district. Out of district, there's a completely other district or process. That's your interdistrict transfers. The non-boundaried schools are listed there. And this is where it does get very unusual. And even when we talked a couple of weeks ago at the board item around enrollment patterns that Frank and helped us prepare, Davis Demographics said it's really challenging to do projections in your district because of these schools that are non-boundaried schools. So you have these schools, 6 elementaries or 5 elementaries at K-8, out of those 2 K-5s, Arcade, and then El Camino Fundamental High School. Historically, Arcade and El Camino, at least in the last probably 10 plus years, have not had waiting lists. So whoever has wanted to get into those schools has been able to get into those schools. Some of our elementary schools, those schools do have, but it's not necessarily that these non-boundaried schools are the ones that have the highest waiting list. And we'll get to that here in just a second. So go ahead, and I think you're going to speak to that a little bit later, correct?
Yes.
So I spoke a little bit to inter and intra-district transfers. So for students that are living in the district, if they want to transfer from one school to another, let's say outside of open enrollment, that's the inter-district process that they go through. or no, I'm sorry, that's intra-district. That's an intra-district transfer. Ms. Bassanelli and I were talking. I said, how do you remember inter and intra? I always remember inter because we have interstates, highways, and that means multiple states. I think multiple districts. So inter-district would be families living outside of our district who want to come in. We utilize our open enrollment process before we ever get to the inter-district transfer. So our families are prioritized during that timeline. Now, historically, I will share with you, there are folks that will miss that timeline. We do try and process that. That could be a question that you ask later too, that Brian could probably speak more specifically to. The intra-district transfer are those families living within the district. It's accessible, as it says, all year long. And the priority is in that first week of March when we look at who we want to try and see if we can meet with. But I know Brian is constantly working with families for whatever reason to try and accommodate them. Sometimes it might even be folks moving into the district in the middle of the school year. Their neighborhood school could be full. So now they're going through an intra-district transfer. In a situation like that, if you are overloaded from your home school, you have rights back to that school the following year, correct, Brian? So what happens in those situations if we have to overload kids out? So let's just say it's the Paula Viasquez Elementary School, and we overload Dr. McKibben out in his kindergarten year. He has a right to come back in first grade, which might mean someone else could get bumped out in first grade. And that creates some real unique challenges over time. That is not a non-boundary school issue. That is an issue at all schools throughout the district when we talk about overloads. So I'm going to let Melissa jump back into our specialized programs.
Okay, so beyond our non-boundary schools, we have other specialized programs that you see here on the slide. All of the schools that are attached to these specialized programs are boundary schools. So they all have boundaries. Our Rapid Learner program and the International Baccalaureate program in grades 6-12 have specific entrance criteria, and they go through a different enrollment process that's outside of the processes that we just talked about, open enrollment and the intra and inter-district transfer process. In looking at our education code, so this links to that first common assumption that I mentioned at the start of the presentation, which is that San Juan chooses to implement open enrollment. This is not a choice. It is per education code that we implement open enrollment practice. And here's a piece that comes out of that education code. Not only does it direct us to have a process for allowing choice for families to choose an alternative school other than their neighborhood school, it also suggests some priorities in terms of placement, asking us to consider siblings, employment locations, as well as to improve situations for students that might be harmful or dangerous as a part of an investigation. In looking at our board policies and administrative regulations, attachment C provides board policy 5116. This is around school attendance boundaries. And some key things out of this policy is that it does call for the periodic review of school boundaries. And it also provides factors for consideration while we're reviewing those boundaries. In attachment D and E, those attachments link to board policy and administrative regulation 5116.1, which is around our intra-district open enrollment process. And inside both the board policy and the administrative regulation, it establishes our timeline as well as our process and our priorities. So we wanted to pause at this point to see if there's any questions related to the pieces that we just covered.
And let me make one statement before we get into that. She mentioned that 5116, the periodic reviews of boundaries. That is something that I don't think historically we have done as much as other districts. We have closed schools, which has caused us to review them upon school closures. But when we've went back and looked at it, and we're even going to see this in the census data, we see significant growth in some areas, but we have not adjusted our boundaries. So that's something that, do we want to consider? What would that look like? What are the impacts of that? Because that is in our policy, but not something historically that we've done. We we remember when we made some changes probably 12 years ago, Frank, around secondary boundaries, but elementary boundaries goes all the way back to the early 2000s. Okay. Okay.
And just to make sure it's on the recording, the answer was we couldn't find one. Just because Frank didn't have a microphone. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn it to questions from my colleagues, and we'll start with Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. I have a quick question. You explained intra, I believe it was intra. Thank you. Here's my question. I have an eighth grader who's in a non-boundary school, let's say Arcade, okay? And I assume that Arcade feeds into El Camino because I live in El Camino boundaries. Do I have to apply to get an El Camino because I live in I don't know if El Camino even has boundaries.
doesn't.
Probably
It does
doesn't.
not.
Don't use that one as an example. So because El
Bad
Camino is,
example, Saul.
now examples of that, there's a non-boundary. Let's pick any other pick. Mariloma's closer, so let's not use that. Let's say Rio. So if you,
You reside in Rio boundaries, you're attending Arcade currently. Your question is, do you have to open enroll or
In El
apply
Camino?
to go to Rio? The
That would
answer is
answer, that would be an obvious yes.
in order
But-
to go to
but-
El Camino, you would have to open enroll. So all students that go to El Camino right now have to open enroll to
Okay, I
get in
guess I
there.
answered my question because if I live in a non-boundary area, I still would have to apply to get in a non-boundary school.
well,
Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct.
All right, thank you. I answered my,
Yeah, no, it's so I'm going to
Confusing.
restate that because it is, if you live right, let's say you lived right across the street from any one of those 8 schools.
Yeah.
You literally looked out your front door and you saw that school. Okay. Every one of those schools, you have to apply through the through open enrollment to get into those 8 schools.
so what, and there is no priority. No, there isn't, because I'm still in a non-boundary, live in a non-boundary area, you know.
So there's a priority number 2 that and it's in one of the attachments. And Brian and I were speaking this morning. It's actually on the on our flyer or the,
If you go to attachment F
Yeah,
for the open enrollment brochure, the second page of it, it gives you the priorities. And if you look at the second priority, students residing within a 40% superimposed radius of a non-boundary choice school, they have second priority.
okay.
so, but and this is a conversation that prior to the board meeting I had with more than one board member. The reality is, if you don't know that,
Yeah.
it doesn't do anything for you. You still have to apply through that process. So that's one of the probably conversations that we could have coming out of this. How could we do it differently? What are the changes that could be made to that? So it's a really good question to start this off. I think it shows how complicated the system is. I think all the time, let's use Arcade as an example. There's an apartment complex right across the street from it. If someone moves in there, you normally would assume that's my school. You go to enroll in the district and they say, Churchill's your home school. Well, I live right there. Well, you can apply. If there's space, you can get in. Now, historically, we haven't had large waiting lists, at least in the last couple of years. I mean, we have it, maybe some grades with Arcade, but not really at El Camino. So that's part of the complicating factor of this as well. So good question to start off with.
Ms. Costa.
And I'm also interested in that 40% students residing within a 40% superimposed radius of a non-boundary choice elementary school. The radius is to be defined yearly by 40% of the total enrollment of each non-boundary choice elementary school. So how do we communicate with parents about that? And do they understand that if they're in that 40%, they would still have to abide by whatever the philosophy is of, if they live across the street? And I remember that was the example when we were dealing with this non-boundaried issue years ago. I live across the street. I want to go to X, Y, or Z elementary school. How will they be notified? And they have to open enroll just like everybody else, right?
Correct.
They just have second priority in the process.
Yes.
Do we know approximately how many people participate in that?
I don't know if we do. Brian, is that something we have?
I don't, it's a conversation that we've had recently, that it would be interesting to gather some additional data and see what are the percentages around each of those non-boundaried schools of the 40% that go there. Because when you look at the scattergrams for some of the schools, there's a much more of a cluster directly around the school than you look at Orangevale Open, and they're all over the place.
Right.
So it's probably proximity program may have an impact on that. I will say Orangevale Open is a very, very unique program that people, look to go to for that program. So it really depends on the specific non-boundaried school.
But it is a part of our ongoing, it's part of our ongoing wonderings in terms of how do
Yeah.
we improve communication around this opportunity for families that live within that superimposed boundary, that perimeter that may or may not already be communicating with San Juan. So how do we get better connected into the community around this opportunity? And then also, how do we help share what the schools have to offer with those communities so that when they're making choices, it's a really informed choice?
And Ms. Cost, I think Melissa shared with me the other day when we really don't have a targeted strategic plan to address that to the community. That could be a priority we could make coming out of this as well. What would it look like if we were to communicate, identify that non-boundaried area and really have a commitment every year that we're going to let them know? I know individual schools have done that because when the previous principal at Arcade got there, she actually sent letters out directly to some of those nearby apartment complexes saying, if you want to go here, here's how you make sure you get there. But I think it could really benefit us if we had it more of a consistent systemic approach from the district doing that.
Thank you.
Ms. Creason.
I wasn't going to talk about this, but just because I have some lived experience kind of recent on this, because Caden was open enrolled into all the schools that he went to. And so just my experience prior to being a school board member and knowing what I knew, just people in my life said Cowan was a great school, send Caden to Cowan, and then I was talked through the process. And that was the only reason why I knew anything about it. He didn't get in and he was waitlisted. We had the opportunity and we needed to move. And so we literally looked at greatschools.com. We didn't know much of anything and picked the best number we could find and moved to the closest school we could. So he was in Trajan for 2 days, got off the wait list and ended up at Cowan after we moved our whole household and went to Cowan, and then we moved there and bought our house over there. We learned that it was time to open enroll when we got a letter, from his home, saying his open enrollment time. They assigned his homeschool, which I didn't know was his homeschool until we got that letter, and then was able to open enroll him to Arden. And then the same process for, high school time, and we open enrolled him to El Camino. So I guess I just share that just to say that was my lived experience recently going through the process, but a lot of it was based on just having conversations with people in the community of what would be good for my kid. And knowing, I know a little bit more now, as he was going into high school than before. But that was what a lot of it was based off of. I will say we get the notice really early on that it's time to this is where you're going to go if you don't do something. I felt like there was a lot of wiggle room in there to at least absorb the information. But what does that really mean when you're picking a school? What are you picking in the way of programming and whatnot isn't? It's kind of, if you know, and if you don't, you don't. So I just want to share that. And so this is probably a really dense question, but I'm having a hard time understanding. So I'm looking at slide number 9, where it calls out education code, which pretty much says, the way I'm reading it is open enrollment is how things are supposed to be, that you have to. So I guess I'm just not understanding what's the difference between our practices and how we do open enrollment versus what's required by ed code and what all the other districts do that don't call themselves an open enrollment district. Does that, I don't know if I articulated.
Yeah, I don't know that there's any difference in other districts,
So everyone pretty much does it the way we do it then, right?
except you do not see, so the number I wrote down again is, I think we have 5,800 students that populate those 8 non-boundaried schools. So 14% of our population automatically goes into, or those other programs that Ms. Bassinelli spoke about. That's probably what's very, very unique about us, but in other districts, choice is there as well. And you can choose to go to whatever school you want. I think it's just heightened so much because of these non-boundaried schools.
Thank you. I was trying to understand the difference. That answered my question. That's it for me for now.
Dr. McKibben.
You mentioned wait lists early and you said that most schools have wait lists. Are most of the wait lists at the entry point, or are there schools that have wait lists at particular grade levels?
We see it across, obviously, if you're looking at a high school, you're going to have much more of a wait list at 9th grade than you will at 10th, 11th, and 12th. Same thing at our elementary schools. You're going to see a larger wait list at K and then 1, and then it just dwindles over time. Often when I even mention overloading families, if we have to overload a family, people will get into that other school. And when Brian or before Michelle would contact them and say, hey, you can go back to they're like, oh no, we're fine in the school we are now, because they've built those relationships to the staff and to the community. So, but really, it would kind of work as you'd think. At those entry points are higher, and then it just gets less and less.
I want to ask, and maybe I haven't decided whether it's the right time to ask it, so I'm going to ask it now, and you can say, why don't we get to that later? But what you opened up talking about who we are and our why in terms of the equity lens, in terms of increasing access and addressing barriers. Having been studying this for a while, I suspect, in getting ready for this, what would you say are the pluses and minuses, the advantages and disadvantages of open enrollment related to those 3 things? The equity, improving our equity lens, increasing our access, and addressing our barriers.
Let's wait on that,
Yeah,
because
that's what I was gonna-
I think when we get through, some of these will come through, and I think at the end, we can kind of speak to what we think are some of the challenges, because those will come out in some of the other data that we're going to look at, not in the next group, but after that.
And the one thing as I read these things, and I think we've already said it, this sort of thing, is how do we get information to the people as they make the decisions in a way better than we're doing it now? That's my open question. That's it.
And thank you for kicking us off. We are just a few slides in and have quite a few more to go. But I do have one initial question related to these. And prior to me asking it, I just kind of want to offer one example, which was my lived example, which, I lived in an apartment complex on the corner of Marconi and Walnut. The bus lines were such that it was actually easier to get to El Camino, because I learned when I moved here that we didn't transport kids, which is a whole different topic that we'll be talking about later this evening. And so I ended up at Mira Loma, not knowing anything about these complicated systems. And it's almost equidistant, but it took 2 bus lines to get there, et cetera. But at the time, I didn't know the programs that were offered there. Every day that I've been in kind of services district, I remember that I got lucky that that school had what it needed to meet my needs, had the curriculum and the program to meet my needs. And one of the interesting or compelling parts of this conversation that I find is that it should not be luck. Like, every single one of our kids should have what they need at each individual school to succeed. And it should not be dependent on kind of an information barrier that parents may or may not be able to overcome, because that just wasn't an option for my mom. We came in, didn't know anything about the district, how it worked, didn't know anything about boundaries or non-boundaried schools, et cetera. So that's kind of why this conversation piques my interest. One question that I have is sort of, can you speak to how we have kind of historically prioritized open enrollment and any changes that we made. I'm asking primarily about kind of sibling cohorts, but any other changes and considerations that we've made.
Yeah, Dr. Calvin, you want to take this one?
So in the past, there was this thing called No Child Left Behind. And what we used to do was if you were in an underperforming school, then you had top priority. We would send letters out to all of the families of all of those schools that were underperforming, and you could determine whether or not you wanted to participate in open enrollment. And after that, then we would allow our siblings and children of employees who went to those, who worked at those schools. They would get first priority. And after that, it would be the ones who live within the 40% of the radius of the non-boundaries, and all the students of parents who worked in the district, not necessarily that school. They were second priority, and then everyone else fell in the third. When No Child Left Behind ended, we had a very healthy conversation in cabinet about what we needed to do with that, because legally we did not have to allow students from non-performing schools to have priority over everyone else. And what we ultimately decided to do was to still allow the students in the underperforming schools to have top priority, but it would be with everyone else who fell under priority one.
We utilize Title I schools, that's that.
Yes, so we still identify the Title I underperforming schools, and we have a list of them each year that we present, but they fall under priority one rather than they get that letter out ahead of everybody else.
Thank you. And I have one other question, but two, I realized also I did not actually finish my thought prior, which was go Matadors. I feel like I ended up at Mariloma. I wanted to emphasize it was probably very singly like the most impactful moment in my life, because I went to Mariloma. I ended up with the support I needed. Went off to college, etc. So when I think about the course of my life, that was a very important point. So I just wanted to make sure to say that, and go Matadors. And then my last question is just on slide 9, right? And we go back to the education code, which of course very clearly states that parents are permitted, and we have an obligation to fulfill, that desire to indicate a preference for a school. But then it ends that clause without displacing other currently enrolled students. This statute, unless there's more, doesn't really seem to contemplate, non-boundaried schools. So I just want to point that out. I actually don't even know if I have a question. It doesn't, that end sentence there doesn't really seem to contemplate the system that we have. And therefore, nor does it contemplate a lot of the competing priorities that we end up with in an open enrollment system.
Yes.
Thank you for confirming. Okay. Okay, we have one more question from,
So sorry.
can it wait till the next section of questions?
No, because I think
Okay,
it's this
okay.
section,
All
but
right,
if
go
you
ahead.
want to bump me later, that's fine. Or if you not want to answer at all, that's fine too. What is the benefit of having non-boundary schools?
You got this.
So I think the benefit when those were created was often they were schools that may have been struggling in enrollment. And it was similar to, we're going to add these programs to it. And Ms. Costa can probably speak to this as much as anybody, because I think she was around working in the district in the elementary division when some of these non-boundary schools were created. But an opportunity almost to like create a magnet school. So a school where people would have to choose to go to. And that was the thought. But that was a long time ago when we created those. And the changes that have taken place since then, you think about charter schools, choice, that was pretty much the only choice you could make back in the day. Now choice is everywhere. And so that was the thinking. And let me just say this, El Camino was, they went to El Camino Fundamental School back in the day when the district was considering closing, and this was in the early 80s, either La Sierra or El Camino. So El Camino created this, what they thought was a unique program. And in the end, they stayed open and La Sierra ended up closing.
So my next question then, sorry, is if that's the case, and we did this because of history, are we going to discuss the possibility of not having non-boundary schools in the future?
I think if that would be the will of the board, I think the question that we would need to ask would be, if we chose to put boundaries on all of our school, what would be the impact to those programs? And I think what we would probably say is it would be different for different programs. I think potentially if we decided to put boundaries around our secondary schools, you would see very little impact, because when you say what is fundamental, it's hard to say what's unique about those programs. But there are some programs that are very unique. And that's where, when you look at where they draw from all over the place, you could really significantly change what that program looks like. And then if that was the case, would those individuals, because they have choice, choose to go somewhere completely outside the district?
I'm going to ask that we continue with the slides and the next round of questions be held until our next pause point.
Okay, so we could get back to, here we go. Okay, so on slide 12, we start to look at the participation data related to open enrollment and transfers. And we selected 2019 as our data point to look at, because this is really our last pre-COVID data set. So with that, when you look at open enrollment, we had about 3,900 participants, with about 81% being placed. When we analyzed schools that had a large amount of students who were not placed, so schools with limited placement, you see 6 schools listed there. 4 of 6 of these schools have boundaries. And that was kind of an aha for us, because I believe the assumption in the system is that it's very challenging to access a non-boundary school, when really what we were seeing is that there is impact. There are large wait lists for schools that have boundaries for families who are participating through the open enrollment process, which you can see that Detterding, which has a specialized program, is the top of that list. In terms of the 2019 transfers, this is for inter and intra-district transfers. About 4,500 total participants participated in those processes, and about 57% were placed. We then started to slice up the participant data looking at low income. And so when you look at the low income participation, 20% of the participants are students that are identified as low income. This is disproportionate compared to our low income rate in 2019 as a district, which was at 53.2%. When you dig into the placement rates, the placement rates are fairly comparable for open enrollment and intra-district transfer participants. It's very similar to what we saw on slide 12. However, for inter-district participation, there's a higher placement rate in that area. It's 79% on this slide, and on the previous slide, it was 66%. Looking at primary language, you can see the participation rates by families with a by primary language on the left with the columns. And it is very comparable to what in 2019 the San Juan district primary language percentage was for within the system. So we did not see the variance that we saw with low income. And it was very similar when you look at when you dig into the total participants for open enrollment, inter-district and intra-district, we saw that it's comparable to district averages for open enrollment and intra-district, with again, inter-district transfers being higher at 76% compared to the system average at 66% placement. Digging into ethnicity, you can see the participation rates by ethnicity in the red columns that are on the slide. And comparing that to 2019 data, it's fairly comparable. When you dig into the participation in open enrollment, inter and intra, it trends in the same direction that I just discussed on the low income as well as primary language slides, and that we saw a higher degree of placement for inter-district transfers at 77% compared to 66%. So we're going to pause.
Thank you. Any questions up to this point? Dr. McKibben?
On the transfer, and I think, and I need to get the term right, the transfer that Dr. Calvin was talking a bit about in terms of the comprehensive support and improvement program and those folks having the rights to transfer and so forth, and they probably fall into some of these categories. In this district, how many students have we had that are eligible for transfer in this section of law that actually have transferred into another school in this district? Approximately.
We'd have to get that to you later. John.
It's relatively small though, right?
We would have to pull
Yeah,
that
we'd have-
data and get it back to you
Okay.
on that.
All right. Sorry, just thought of it. I should have
Okay.
thought of it yesterday.
No, no problem. We'll see if we can dig
Yeah.
up that information.
I just have a comment on slide 14. I mean, this slide to me probably most clearly kind of identifies that in this case, language equals access, and particularly the command of the English language determines access in our district at some critical points. So I just want to point that out.
I think one of the interesting things, and I wrote down the note about slide 14, is that because if you're a non-English speaker, the supports you need are not spread out throughout the district. And it's likely specific to certain communities. When we look at the West End and we look at our refugee population, we look at our Afghan refugees that have come in, we have much more supports at certain schools based on what we've seen the needs of the community. So.
Okay, sure. Dr. McKibben?
I see the note right here. The question on these transfers and particularly related to economics and that sort of thing is, how would these numbers be different if we had better transportation access for the people in lower income areas? That's kind of an open question, and I don't know the answer.
Yeah, it's likely that if we transported, we may see a higher percentage. The question I think that needs to go along with that would be, what would be the impacts to those neighborhood schools? Because it could have a very adverse effect, even in terms of the types of supports that would be at those schools based on a variety of things. So that's one of the challenges with this is there are probably outcomes, both ends, benefits and consequences.
Mr. Hernandez?
Quick question. The manner in which we categorize a child, for example, in my home, my father spoke to me in English. My mom spoke to me in Spanish. I spoke both. How would I be classified under the language category? Would it be, am I a Spanish speaker or am I an English speaker or both? Did I answer my question? And I ask that because 25% of our population are Hispanic, but only 10% speak Spanish. So is that because the other 15% of those Hispanic kids probably speak English as their first language? Or how do we?
It probably has to do with when you register your student, the information that you provide. I think
On
we
the
may have had
primary
this
language
conversation
one.
a couple of years ago, Ms. Creason. And when it asks there, really, you're having to make a choice. And so I think the same is true. So there's an interesting question is the information that we're asking for from our families when they register their students enough? Could we be doing better in that area? So a whole nother set of questions that we need to consider.
Because based on that, then 15% of those Hispanic kids put English as their main language.
Or a
now.
percentage did
Okay, so-
probably, yep. They're of
Mhm.
Hispanic origin, but they may not speak Spanish.
Okay, we can continue with the next couple of slides.
All right, and I'm going to take over this section, so I'll wait till these get up. I know that the guys have to do a couple of switches to make sure they get it live and as well, so I'll wait till they do all their. So this next section, we want to talk a little bit about boundaries and how they ultimately can affect schools. The first map that you have there shows the existing boundaries. You'll see that the schools that are red on that, those are the ones that are the non-boundaried schools. The K-8s are in kind of the yellow color. You see those are throughout the regions as well. But where the schools are placed on the boundaries as well, I'm going to wait one more second here, really can have an impact on this when you look at the size of these boundaries. So I'm going to come back to a school, but next slide first, Melissa. So when we look at the next slide,
My clicker's not working. There we go.
so when we look at this slide, what this shows us is the percentage of students who transfer out from their home school to another school. You'll notice non-boundaried schools aren't on here because they don't have an attendance area, so no one's transferring out of those schools. Our highest percentage school of transferring out, actually, and I was surprised by this, is Northridge Elementary, 58.6%. We've highlighted all the schools above 40%. And in the appendix, there's this matrix. And the reason why we wanted to include this particular matrix is it shows exactly where those students are going. And I think it tells some interesting stories. So when I look at, can you go back a slide real quick, Melissa? So when I look at Northridge, for example, the highest percentage school, and I look at their boundaries, and you see the area where Kingswood is, we currently have, let me find this here. This is so small. We have 21 students that go to Kingswood. Well, when I look at the boundary, proximity wise, it may be a whole lot easier for me to get there and not have to cross Madison Avenue. Then I look at, we have a pretty big number that goes to Trajan. Again, probably closer to Trajan. I don't have to cross Madison Avenue. So for convenience, am I going to Trajan? Same is true possibly for Orangevale Open and Pershing. So our boundaries in some of these situations were drawn a long time ago when the population density in these communities looked very different, and they haven't been adjusted. So Melissa, if you go, so that's a non-boundaried school. Now let's look at, or that was a boundaried school. If we look at the slide on a non-boundaried school, and in your appendix, you have the other non-boundaried schools as well. So you can look at the scattergrams on that. One of the assumptions we made was that neighborhood kids, and we spoke to this early on, couldn't get into these non-boundaried schools. And if I actually look at on the matrix, Star King, they have 170 students that Star King is their neighborhood school that go to Mission Avenue. That was a surprise to us. I think Deborah and I probably had the biggest aha because we were assuming that didn't happen. So we're assuming the kids that live right across the street don't get to go there. Well, they probably do, but the question is, do all of them? Is it one of those things where, you know, Ms. Creason, you had some families speak to you, so you knew. So are their families communicating? They're accessing these programs. I think we need to dig into these a little bit more and try and figure out what's going on. Obviously, they serve students from all over, from Citrus Heights, other parts of Carmichael, all the way over to our West End. Students are going there, so it's being accessed, but they probably have a pretty tight cluster that part of the program is drawing from an area around it. So we wanted to share that for that elementary school. If you go to the, okay, we'll take, you want us to go through all of them and take questions, or do you want to break them out?
We can just do a quick check at this point, just see if there's any questions, but seeing, it doesn't look like there is, so we could just go through
Okay.
the middle and high schools too.
So the next two we want to go to is, when we look at this, we're going to look at the same data. We're going to look at the transfer out rates by schools. Again, you have Orangevale Open, that's non-boundaried, Arcade, that's non-boundaried. Oh, go back for a second. So this is interesting because if you look at Churchill, their boundary is, they're right on the edge of their boundary. And so, but they have that large area there. Same thing for when you look at Will Rogers, where they are and where they draw from creates some real challenges. And I think with Rogers, one of the unique challenges is, and if we could completely rebuild the district at this point in time, the majority of those kids, their high school is San Juan High School. And we're going to see that San Juan has the highest transfer rate out. Well, you go to school at Rogers, you're right across the street from Del Campo. You're intermixing with students who go to Del Campo. Are you making a choice to go then to high school with those kids there? So unique situations like that create some problems potentially that exacerbate that transfer out rate. So go ahead and go to the next one, Melissa. You can see again the numbers here. Our highest percentage out is in Encina Preparatory, or now KJ Middle School, at almost 60%. And so some of the other things that's interesting when you look at a school like Kingswood at 54%, we were surprised at Churchill being as high as it was with that percentage of transferring out. Is, are people choosing not to go to a K-8? They want to go to a traditional school and a middle school. Where are we seeing students? And we saw this when we looked at the K-8 presentation that Amber Lee did. We see that at that transfer point of sixth grade into sixth grade at K-8, students are transferring out so they can go to a traditional middle school to access maybe the programs that are there. Go ahead and go to the high school.
Did you want to look at
Pardon me?
did you want to look at Arcade?
Oh,
Or-
yeah, thank you, sorry.
Uh-huh.
Arcade, you can see again as well that they're a non-boundaried school. Historically, this has probably changed dramatically. 20 years ago, they probably had one of the lowest low SES rates, and now they're a Title I school.
Correct.
So, I went there way back when, and I took a bus from Fair Oaks to there. Okay, so it hit these types of changes. So we've completely changed our system, but never thought about what are the impacts to the community and the boundary. We're seeing when you look there as well, proximity wise, there's a large group of students from Dyer Kelly, right around Dyer Kelly, that are choosing to go to Arcade. Well, that's probably a good thing because it's more convenient for them in terms of their neighborhood. So those are things, again, that if Arcade had a boundary, would even more students from that community access it because it would be considered their home school? Would that, we have an overcrowding issue at Churchill, would that help that issue? Would it balance out some of our really facility issues that we have related to middle schools in the West End? Okay, go ahead and go to the next one. So here are the existing boundaries for high schools. You can see El Camino is right on that border of the Rio boundary, Mariloma boundary, not too far from the Encina boundary. So they're going to draw, you're going to see from all throughout that region. Go ahead and show the next slide. This is the transfer rate, again, highest, 64.4 at Encina, 69% at San Juan. That's San Juan's the highest transfer out rate in the district. Go ahead to the next one. So, and then this is where you see where those students are coming from to El Camino High School. So with that, I think I'm going to allow Melissa to address the key findings, and then we'll move on from there.
So in considering the common assumptions that we shared at the beginning of this presentation and a review of the data, we were left with a few key findings that were revealed. And in looking at the participation data, you can definitely see that low-income families, they participate in the open enrollment and transfer process at a disproportionately low rate. Neighborhood students and families are accessing non-boundary schools within their neighborhoods, as you can see within the scattergrams. And participation in the open enrollment and transfer process by underrepresented groups does not appear to be disproportionate when we looked at the participation data. So with that, we'd like to turn it over to the board for any questions and discussion.
I'll turn it to my colleagues for any further questions and comments and discussion amongst us at this time, among us at this time. Okay. Ms. Creason?
Just a comment really that it seems like we have a lot to think about. A whole lot to think about. And I think that this presentation, it was a great, wonderful presentation, but I think I'm left with new questions I didn't consider before. So I hope we can have another discussion about this and just kind of let this sit and marinate. And I mean, as you mentioned, a couple of rounds ago that, one decision affects, we could have a lot of unintended outcomes, based on any decisions that are made. And so I just hope that before any decisions are made about, let me ask a question. Do you have a timeline in your mind of when we would actually take any action, or is there some time to do a lot more reflection and discussion?
Well, so there's a couple of pieces to that. So first, I think that's what we wanted. We wanted to kind of pique people's interest because at times it seems real simple. If you just do this, this will fix this problem. We hear that. And we hear that from certain communities. And I think the answer to that is no, it's not that simple. We brought this when we did because any significant changes really would need to be made before the open enrollment process, which starts in December. So we're talking about significant changes, okay? So if we said, hey, we want to change boundaries, that's not likely going to happen for the 22-23 school year. Because if we started having that conversation amongst our communities, my guess is, and that's probably one of the reasons we haven't done it as much as we had in the past, is it elicits reactions. Now, I will share with you, the last time we changed secondary boundaries, it didn't elicit a lot of feedback. We had a community event at Bella Vista High School. We had 13 staff members there and we had one community member show up.
Wow.
And it was because our open enrollment process actually allows people to get into where they want to.
Yeah.
So folks weren't as worried about it. But if we were to say, we're now going to put a boundary around some of our open schools or whatever that looks like, the secondary schools, we need to make sure we go out and we have that conversation with our community. The other piece of it is, do we want to explore that? Or are there some other things that we could do and gather beforehand? The approach of how could we communicate more? So we wanted to pique the interest here. There's probably more conversations that need to go on between myself and you on one-on-ones that would then help us know what potential next steps are. This is not something that we want to rush. This is an issue, when I think back to decisions that were rushed by this district around grade configurations or other things, it's like 10, 12 years later, we're trying to undo some of those things. So I say this again and again, whatever we're going to do, let's make it really thoughtful so that 20, 30, 40 years from now, people go, they don't say that was a stupid decision. They say, okay, that was well thought out and had the intended outcomes that they had hoped.
That's great. And I'm glad that we're having the discussion. It looks like we have a lot to talk about, and I'm glad that we're going to take our time and let everything bubble up as it will organically as we work through it.
Dr. McKibben.
I agree with you that, and I'm going to complicate it even more in terms of, I think that part of this conversation also has to be things that we haven't talked about when talking about enrollment issues. For example, since the last time, the ways that we deliver curriculum and different kinds of things, the alternate ways of transmitting information, thinking we ought to be thinking about virtual academies. And I know we've already started looking at that sort of thing. The whole idea is over this last year, we've learned a good deal related to hybrid learning. And it goes back to that where you started, and that is, are the things that we're looking at and thinking about going to increase access for all of our students, but particularly for our students at the lower economic side of the things, in terms of they seem to be having less access, looking at that 80-20 kind of thing, is can we, as we have this discussion, think about things like transportation, think about things like the way we deliver material, think about the kinds of programs that we have that are that ought to be available across things. For example, career technical education programs ought to be part of the discussion, and in terms of expanding the access of those programs for people wherever they live, not because they were in the zip code roulette and weren't close to those kinds of programs. I think there are lots of things to think about in terms of that, not just where people live, but how we deliver the kind of the information, the education that we're delivering to increase access, to break down those barriers. And that's the thing, have to be part of this conversation.
Yeah, so one of the things, I'll use CTE as an example. There's no way that we can offer all things to all people. And so, if that was the case, you wouldn't have enough students to actually have those programs running. And so students do have to make a choice at some point. If I have an interest in X program and I know it's here, then I would need to go there. I think some of the challenges often is 8th graders don't always know where they want to go, and they're having to make those decisions for high school. So it does create some unique challenges. I think the access through virtual is how can we do that? I think that's something in the coming years we'll look more at, and that could be accessed through virtual, maybe even more CTE programs. But I want to be, we're never going to get to the point, the challenge, even when we looked at the K-8 presentation again, we're never going to be able to offer in-person programs everywhere. That part wouldn't work.
I have a couple of additional questions, and then we're going to move to one public comment, and then we'll have one last opportunity for comments or questions, and then we'll likely be at time and need to wrap it up. And first, kind of the question of why? Why are we bringing this up? I mean, first, I think kind of the question of enrollment and open enrollment and how our families enroll is typically one piece of a long list of questions when we start to examine what it means to have equitable access to our programs. And so there's that piece. There is, as was also mentioned, right, our board policy that says it's it's actually the superintendent's obligation to look at it and make recommendations, but it's being done as a governance team, which I appreciate. I appreciate the opportunity to have that discussion early on, but that's to say, I mean, any significant changes would likely not be simple to make, right? Nor come without, probably upsetting some contingent of our community. And I think we're at the place where we've tackled probably much more harder things than we ever thought we'd have to tackle in the last couple of years. So why not take this opportunity when we know that a lot of our infrastructure was not exactly built around the changing demographics of our district and where we need to kind of right size where appropriately. I do also just have one note on slide 13 that I wanted to kind of ask about. And I don't fully anticipate there being an answer, but this kind of this percentage here on percentage placed and the enter percentage being 80 and the entra being 55, which means to say that 80% of students not within our school district boundaries who come and try to go to school in this district are placed at a significantly higher level than the 55% that are intra, so within the district, right? So it's these numbers which suggest that, well, we might not be more accommodating of schools outside of our boundaries. There are policy points in place that make it easier if you're not from this district to get placed in this district.
And I
Any
think-
reflections on that?
I have some thoughts, but I'd like to, Brian, you have some thoughts on that?
What I would just say is that you have to remember that the open enrollment piece is the first number up there. And it's 80% of those students. Those are all students in our district that do get placed. Then we go to outside folks for the inter-district transfers. Then the intra is really there for folks who missed the open enrollment timeframe. And then we get 55% of those people placed. So when you put the 80 and 55 together, we are actually serving our students pretty well. It's just, don't forget that that open enrollment is our kids too.
That's helpful context. I was reading that a little bit off.
And let me, one of the questions I think that would be good to provide to the board, Brian, would be around those inner districts and where they're placed. Because my guess is you're probably having a higher number of inters. Let's take Mariloma, for example. Okay, let's take Rio. You know this, you had quite a bit of folks from Sac City coming your way. I would be curious to look at what's the percentage of inters by division. Because my guess is you're not going to see a whole lot of inters in high demand elementary schools. So that's a piece that I think, Brian, if you could get that for us. And maybe this is the other piece of this. Good questions like that we provide more information to the board for potential next steps on this. So.
And I also, this is definitely a rhetorical question, but on slide 18, where we highlight the schools that have a transfer rate out of 40%, I mean, I'd be interested in the answers to two questions, which is one, why do the sites, if you were to ask the site, why do you think you have a high transfer out rate? I'm curious what they would say, but I'm also just curious what our families would say, like if there was a way, I know it's not built into the process now, but if there was a way as part of the kind of open enrollment process to just kind of have a multiple choice checkbox of why are you not interested in attending your boundaried, your neighborhood school? That would be an interesting data point. It'd probably be a lot of work. But I just wanted to express my interest in that. And actually, speaking of a lot of work, I just want to say thank you to the team who put these together. I mean, these are very complicated. A lot of work went into this. So I want to say, just express my appreciation because I know a lot of work went into this workshop. We were going to try to actually have it earlier, but there was just a lot of digging that needed to happen. So I just wanted to say thanks to the team.
So I think your first question there about the whys, that is something that I think we should explore as well. Because I'm making, again, some assumptions related to that. When I look at some of these, I'm making assumptions about proximity to other schools and proximity to, like I look at Whitney, and Melissa and I were looking at this yesterday. Cowan Fundamental is less than a mile away from that school. Okay. So how does that impact that school or surrounding schools in increasing the number? So I'll work with Trent and see if there's a way that we could reach out to families who have chosen, we're trying to gather some information, what kind of percentage we could get out of those people that accessed open enrollment, and see what we can gather, because it would be intriguing to really find out.
And I wonder if there's something that we can hook into our upcoming open enrollment process to collect that data as people participate.
Brian, did you hear that last part?
I'll follow up with them.
Okay. I think trying to find a way, even in our current process, if there wasn't those folks that are filling it out, maybe that'd be the easier way this year. Why are you choosing to access open enrollment? Even if you get 10% of those at one point, then it becomes meaningful data for us to utilize. I
think a point that's become increasingly clear as we prepared this presentation for the board is that there is an immediate action that we can do. And it's really around our communication practices. How do we best communicate within our communities around open enrollment, particularly in neighborhoods that have that 40% superimposed boundary, that radius? Is there something that we can do there? So I think the timing of it, even we're still in the middle of discussion, there are some actionable things that we can do to help build our communication practices.
Thank you. We do have one speaker card on this item. So at this time, I'd like to ask our public speaker, Mr. Cowan, to join us. I'd like to remind the public that comments are limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and the clock on the wall will count down the time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hey, a sincere thank you for the board for serving on a school board in this era. Wow, what a time. You didn't know this was coming, did you? And thanks, I agree, Superintendent Kern and your staff. This is some good scholarship here tonight. I've learned a lot. We don't have a choice to have open enrollment. We have to do it. It looks like we do have some choice on our school boundaries and our policies. It seems to me long-term, open enrollment in our district has created some losers and some winners. And I just question one of the things might be an area for consideration. If a priority one reason to win a placement at your school of choice is that the school in your area is low performing, is that a death spiral? Have we kind of created a death spiral situation without enough students to offer a lot of programs? School becomes less attractive. People hear a rumor that a rich kid school gets a better education out of this district than a poor kid school. They'll try to get their kids to the rich school. Wouldn't blame them. It's a thought thing. What are our priorities and our policies? Thank you for your good hard work.
Thank you. There are no other speaker cards or written comments, so I'll turn it over for one more round of questions or comments from my colleagues. See none, none. Dr. McKibben? All right, thank you for the information. That concludes our workshop. We're going to take a brief recess before I will return to gavel us into closed session at 5:30. Thank you. I call the meeting of the San Juan Unified School District back to order. There are 2 closed session items on tonight's agenda. The first item is student expulsions in 4 cases pursuant to Education Code Section 48918, subdivision F. And the second item is collective bargaining matters. Discussion with negotiator Daniel Thigpen, Senior Director, Labor Relations, regarding CSEA Chapter 127, General Operations, support chauffeurs, Teamsters Local Number 150, transportation, supervisors, teachers, and certificated supervisory units, and regarding non-represented groups, management and confidential units, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. We do not have any speaker cards on any closed session agenda items, so we will now move into closed session and we will return to open session at 6:30. I call the meeting of the San Juan Unified School District Board of Education back to order. Board meetings are being held in person in the boardroom at the district office, and the public is welcome to attend. Thank you to those who attended this evening. Alternatively, the meeting may also be viewed on the district's YouTube channel, where it is being live streamed. Pursuant to state and local health guidelines, masks are required to be worn indoors. Individuals attending in person are requested to keep their masks on for the duration of their time at the meeting. Staff has been stationed outside of the boardroom to ensure that all in-person participants are aware of the mask requirement. The meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recording may capture sounds and images of those attending this meeting. The recording will be posted on the district website. At this time, I'd like to invite you to please stand for the presentation of the colors by the Del Campo High School Air Force Junior ROTC.
Freeze. Colors. You follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Colors. Colors.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Paula Viescas, Board President, and to my right is Dr. Michael McKibben, Board Vice President. To his right is Ms. Zima Creason, Board Clerk, and to her right is Ms. Pam Costa and Mr. Saul Hernandez, Board Members. To my left is Superintendent Kent Kern, and to his left is Board Administrative Assistant Stephanie Cunningham. Before we begin, I'd like to review the two methods that are available to offer public comment at tonight's meeting. For those of you who are attending the board meeting in person and would like to offer a public comment on items that are on the agenda, we ask that you please complete a speaker card that is available to the staff table over here. Ms. Rye just raised her hand in the corner. And you will be called on at the appropriate time during the agenda. The second option is to submit a public comment online using the comment form located on the district website at www.sanjuan.edu/board meeting. If you wish to submit a public comment on more than one agenda item, please submit a separate form for each item on which you are commenting. Comments received by 3:30 p.m. today have already been shared with all board members. Comments received after 3:30 today, including those submitted during the meeting, may be read during the meeting, depending on time restrictions. Comments may only be submitted on an agenda item up until the time that the agenda item has been discussed. Please note that all public comments are limited to 2 minutes or approximately 1,500 characters. With that, we are now at item E, approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes for October 12th? It's been moved by Ms. Creason. Is there a second? Been seconded by Dr. McKibben. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. That was unanimous. We are at item F1, which is the recognition of School Psychology Awareness Week. Dr. Calvin.
Good evening, President Viescas, members of the board, Superintendent Kern, and Ms. Cunningham. The superintendent is recommending that the board adopt resolution number A408, proclaiming November 8th through November 12th as School Psychology Awareness Week. Here to accept the resolution is school psychologist Holly Januso.
Good evening, President Viescas, board members, Superintendent Kern, and Ms. Cunningham. The school psychologists are a small but mighty group. Currently, we have 33 school psychologists and 3 full-time school psychologist interns. We serve every school in the district, doing a myriad of jobs, including consulting with teachers on academic and behavioral interventions, counseling with students and family, conducting psychological and academic assessments, and providing crisis intervention to students and schools in need, just to name a few. We are considered experts in learning, behavior, mental health, and school systems. We appreciate the recognition the board and the district is giving the school psychologists, and on behalf of all of my colleagues, I want to say thank you.
Thank you very much on behalf of a grateful board. We thank you all very much for all of the work that you've done and congratulate you on your resolution and thank you for being here to accept it. I do just want to see if there's any other comments from my colleagues before we go to the motion. Ms. Creason.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you and to acknowledge that I know your job is incredibly hard. Mental health is near and dear to my heart for a variety of reasons. I'm sorry, you were trying to make your exit. I didn't mean to stop you. Like, get him out.
No, but now that you're saying such lovely things, we'll say.
I'll make it quick. Just really appreciate what you do. What you do every day is important, but then add in you're doing this work in a school setting. I mean, that changes some dynamic. Now you're doing it in a school setting while we're in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, we just keep layering it on all of our staff, but I understand, what you do is just so important for our families and our students and for our school community and staff. So just thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
And before you run off, we'll go ahead and formally adopt the motion. Is there a motion to adopt resolution number A408, proclaiming the week of November 8th through the 12th as School Psychology Awareness Week? It's been moved by Ms. Costa. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Creason. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. We are now at item F2, high school student council reports. Tonight, we will hear from student representatives from Mira Loma High School and Encina High School. Welcome, and we're excited to have you all. We will begin with Abigail Pearson and Emma Pham Tram from Mira Loma. Abigail and Emma, please begin when you're ready. And welcome.
Good evening, President Viasquez, members of the board, Superintendent Kern, and Ms. Cunningham. I am Abby Pearson. And I am Emma Pham Tran. And we are from Mira Loma High School. We are excited to discuss some of our recent achievements as well as some upcoming plans with you all today.
Of all our recent activities and athletic achievements, the one we are most excited to inform you about is a series of homecoming events we have held this past month. At our school, we are proud to continue our longstanding tradition of building floats, which we display on campus and at our homecoming football game. Float building is a school-wide competition between the various classes and is judged by members of our staff. We successfully completed 4 floats this year and had an amazing student turnout at the football game on October 1st against Dixon. This past Saturday, the 23rd, we hosted a homecoming dance on the football field from 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. The requirements to buy a ticket, which we sold from the 20th to the 22nd, are as follows: a completed COVID-19 event acknowledgement form, proof of full vaccination or a negative test no more than 72 hours prior to the dance, and a student ID. Student government coordinated with the district to provide on-site COVID testing after school on the 21st, so all students who wished to had an opportunity to complete all the necessary requirements. We had an overwhelming amount of students in attendance, with around 300 students purchasing tickets.
Another Mira Loma tradition is our canned food drive. Mira Loma is partnered with KCRA 3 to participate in the Kids Can Food Drive. All Mira Loma's cans will be donated to Carmichael Presbyterian Church, our local food bank. The canned food drive started on October 12th and will continue until November 11th. The canned food drive, this process has gone successfully, and our Matadors love giving back to their community so far.
In regards to athletics, we have hosted 2 senior nights for boys and girls water polo, as well as girls volleyball. We congratulate our athletes for finishing the season strong and award special recognition to a specific senior named Jayla Pride for being voted as the Sacramento Bees Girl Prep of the Week on October 1st.
On our calendar for future events, this week is our Spirit Week for the Halloween season. This Friday, October 29th, we are excited to have a lengthy list of activities for students to participate. We are holding a costume contest where winners will receive trick or treat baskets. We are also having a performance by one of our clubs, B Sharps, the same day. B Sharps is an amazing performance-oriented club for aspiring musicians and singers. They have planned a set list to go with our Halloween theme. We also have lunchtime intramural sports. This week marks the start of our miniature golf intramurals. Each season, we have about 30 to 100 students sign up depending on the sport. Miniature golf is a new addition to our intramural sports lineup, but is heavily anticipated, and we expect a good turnout on the audience and students participating.
Next week, we have Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, a cultural festival which will be hosted at Mira Loma's campus on November 2nd from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. To attend, teachers must sign up their classes to visit the festival, and from there will be guided tours or stations with crafts, performances, and information about the history of the celebration. All the activities will be student-led, with a variety of clubs such as Latinos Unidos, Spanish Honor Society, and National Arts Honor Society, having their members teach fellow students the importance of Dia de los Muertos. We recently have had develops regarding testing and grades as well. The PSAT and SAT were held on October 13th, and around 850 students had tested. Our renowned International Baccalaureate program had testing registration and fees due October 25th as well. Students who had struggled in the past year with distance learning have been offered a second chance through our credit recovery classes that are held on campus.
Mira Loma recently also hosted a college fair specifically for the Universities of California this past Friday, the 22nd. Our wonderful counselors organized the events and collaborated with student government to involve teachers by posting the college that they attended for their undergraduate education on their doors. We are proud to be one of 2 San Juan schools given the opportunity to partner with UC Davis for their early academic outreach program. Many students enjoyed the event and felt more informed about their options after high school by the end of the event.
Our speech and debate team has hosted 2 events since the beginning of the school year, with one of those events being the CVFL debate tournament on September 25th and the CVFL speech tournament on October 17th, where we had 2 first-place distinctions. Mayor Loma is proud to be invited to several national competitions for our wonderful speech and debate team. Thank you so much for having us here, and we are honored to represent Mayor Loma and all of our diverse interests. We wish you a good evening.
Thank you very much for joining us and for your wonderful reports. If you don't mind hanging out just for a few minutes and see if we have any questions. Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Ms. Vasquez. I just want my colleagues to know that these fine students at Mayor Loma, being immodest, Friday during their dance, it started raining. You think that would stop most high schools? Not Mayor Loma. They all stayed and danced the night away. And congratulations for a wonderful report.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Creason?
Just one question and one comment. So homecoming, I know it was highly anticipated. And I know that there's a few coming up this weekend or coming up soon. So just want to know, how did it go? Like, how was it everything you needed it to be?
Yes, I think that the students had a very positive response. We all enjoyed it, as the student government class was very happy to give this Mayor Loma campus a bit of cheer during all of this. And a lot of students were very, very excited to hear that we were going to be putting on a dance in such short time, because we had planned the dance in about a week and a half. So
That's impressive.
thank you. So it went astoundingly well, and there were no major incidents at all.
If I could add to that, like Mr. Hernandez said, there was the rain. However, we had been checking our weather apps a lot during that week because we had anticipated the rain, and thankfully we were able to kind of market it as more of a rain dance. And I think that that actually helped gain a lot of traction for it. A lot of people enjoyed it. And we did have tents available for those who wanted it, but a lot of people just, enjoyed sticking it out in the rain.
I love that. I love the spirit of, hey, these are the cards we're going to be dealt, and we're going to make it our idea. This is all part of the plan. That's awesome. And just one other thing, I love that you held your your college fair. You get so much inspiration for those. And I'm just wondering, are there career fairs at your school too?
Yes, we have several career fairs.
I had a hard time getting it out too. Career fair.
career fairs at our school. We host them later on in the year. I believe that we are planning one for before the second semester begins. We mainly focus on apprenticeships, but we also have the CTE program at Mayor Loma. We have a medical program, and some of the seniors are currently doing externships in various medical fields right now.
Thank you for sharing that. That's great to hear. Thank you so much for your report.
Thank you for your report. As a matador myself, I always appreciate the opportunity to hear what's going on at my alma mater. I also appreciate you sharing about Dia de los Muertos. I'm excited about that. I actually already put it on my calendar, so I will be there at 9 a.m. Stephanie, I will be there at 9. Really appreciate the update. I also appreciate you sharing about the food drive. I'll see what I can go dig up in the next grocery shop. But just in general, it's always a great opportunity to hear about all the ways that you're looking to give back, particularly when you haven't been dealt like the best set of cards in terms of high school experience during a pandemic. And I also just want to say thanks for the shout out to your peer, Jayla. I really appreciate that you came to kind of celebrate your peers as well. So thank you all very much, and thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Next up, we will hear from Justin Orozco Ramirez and Alan Vang from Encina. Welcome.
All right, you ready? Good evening, President Villasquez, members of the board, Superintendent Kern, and Ms. Cunningham. I'm Justin Orozco, ASB Vice President.
And I'm Alan Vang, Junior Class Treasurer.
Thank you for inviting us to share all the latest information about Encina Prep High School. As the school year began, we welcome the new start as Encina and Preparatory High School for grades 9 to 12. We share a campus with Katherine Johnson Middle School as well. This transition comes as we had 6th through 12th graders on our campus for the past 10 years. We welcomed a new principal, Ms. Schultes, and we have many returning staff members as well as new faces on campus. It's been an adjustment period sharing the campus as well. It's been really difficult. It's also the first time for all students to be returning to full day in-person learning in 15 months.
The year started off by welcoming 50 of our freshmen to orientation led by our Link Crew leaders. Link Crew is new to Encina. The program continues monthly with academic lessons and social follow-up activities specific to the class of 2025 and their leaders.
Every Friday, students are welcomed with music at our weekly Wake Up Bulldogs to get them energized to start off the day and be successful. Throughout the week, there are lunchtime activities such as games, music, and clubs for students to join. Some of our clubs this year are yearbook, cooking, anime, Encina Creative Arts, Interactive, Future Teachers, and even each of our grade level class clubs. In September, students and staff came to the 3rd annual Kickback on the Quad. Student Senate meetings are held bi-weekly as a listening circle to capture student voice with class representatives.
We just had our homecoming game this past Saturday. Although we didn't have a homecoming dance this year, we are in the planning stages of being able to bring dances back in the spring. Homecoming 2021, the World of Games, was filled with lunchtime activities, and we ended the celebration with our wagon floats at the homecoming game. Students, staff, and families had a great time celebrating homecoming and our football team's victory of 46-6 against Western Sierra.
This week, we're also celebrating Red Ribbon Week, Drug-Free Looks Like Me, with spirit days and pledges to be drug-free. We will be partnering with Point Rest Rotary to put on a Thanksgiving feast in November. With the COVID protocols in place, we will modify this to a student-only event this year and hope to return to a community event next year.
In athletics, there has been an increase in participation. In fact, this is the most athletes we've had in years. Our football team is the largest it has been in a long time. They have their final game against Woodland Christian this Saturday.
Encina is proud of our junior varsity and varsity volleyball teams. These ladies worked hard this season, and our varsity team placed 3rd in league and is now off to playoffs. Congratulations to our Lady Bulldogs.
Our cross-country team has been solid all season and recently finished in 1st place at our last meet to give the team the title of division champs. This year, our dedicated group of coaches are working with our student athletes in improving academics, their attendance, and overall success.
We'd like to share some of our academic supports that have been put in place to support student success this year. Encina's advocacy program went through a redesign process this past summer. Staff has refined the mission and goals of the program, and they are collaborating with classroom teachers to help students to complete work in their classes, working on deepening connections between students and promoting college and career readiness.
The counseling department has been hard at work, continuously enrolling new students, working with departments on course offerings, and bringing college information to classrooms. It is one of the counseling department goals to hold more college and career presentations using Naviance and four-year planners. We also held a virtual cash for colleges. The department hosted the PSAT 2 weeks ago, and 277 students took the test. We've also been working with students that are credit deficient and getting them registered for credit recovery. Not only is this offered throughout the day, but is now offered as part of the advocacy classes on flex days.
We also have after-school resources available for our students. Assets is on campus to provide tutoring, credit recovery, and fun extracurricular activities, as well as IOIT, a program to have mentors support our young men of color in academic and social emotional learning. We're excited to announce that Drumline has returned to Encina. Hope you'll be able to see him perform.
On behalf of Encina Preparatory High School, we would like to thank the board for this opportunity to update you on our school. We would also like to invite you to visit our campus or come to any of our activities and to follow us on social media.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for the report. If you could hang out just for a minute to see if any of my colleagues have questions, that would be great. Mr. Hernandez.
I would, Mr. Ramirez and Mr. Vang, when you mentioned your variety of clubs, you said Future Teachers Club. Is that what you said?
Yes.
What is that? Explain that to me.
So when I was in the club, we tried to improve futures for students that are having a future career of being a teacher, an educator, and to help students, be more more ready for whatever is to come, because there's a lot of challenges in certain areas, and sometimes you just gotta power through what you have,
It's outstanding.
especially coming through a heavy background, where you come from and
That's great.
how you look.
Please let us know what we can do to help. Okay.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you so much for your report.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Creason?
Did I hear you right? 46-6?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Go
Right,
Bulldogs.
yeah.
That is
That was amazing. Yeah, we're proud of our football team.
Oh, like I couldn't have heard that right, but I heard that right. That's really impressive. At the beginning of thank you for your report. It was great. You have a lot going on. I really appreciate just the thoroughness. At the beginning of your presentation, you talked a little bit about the separation of the middle school. And I think I heard you said that there have been challenges with that. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you share a little bit?
So for this past year, well, it's been hard for teachers that have been comfortable with teaching high schoolers to be teaching middle schoolers. And usually it is tough to try to educate, young kids that have a hard time of being taught in a specific manner, especially since high school teachers are to be like stern but very thorough with their students to get them prepared. And sometimes it may be a bit of a problem. But we're trying to figure it out.
So also, since the split, we've also had lines to separate each area. So it's been taking some getting used to, I'd say. So we have to be very restrictive on students crossing, so they can't cross. So yeah.
Yeah, that's about it.
No, thank you for that update. I really do appreciate it. I know it's a work in process. And I do look forward to coming out for a visit. It's been way too long since I visited in Encina, and so I will be back. And I do follow you on social media. Follow me back. And would love to come and visit, some of your events. I'll ask your new principal if I could get added to that list, and I'll come and be helpful and hang out. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate the report.
Thank you.
Thank you both for the report. I also did note the score, 46-6. That's impressive. And do you know if the last game Saturday, is it a home game or is it at Woodland Christian? If you don't know, that's okay.
We could get back to you on that. We're still
You
trying to
got
figure
some
out.
phone of friends over here trying to help. you.
Oh, so it's home.
Oh,
Yes.
it's a home game. Okay, all right. I might try and dig out the information there. Would love to try to come see it if I can on Saturday. Thanks for sharing. I also just really loved hearing about the increase in athletics across the board and just about all the different programs. And I mean, you're both very, very well informed about the changes and some of the challenges, and spoke really well to it. So I really thank you for that. Excited to hear about the drum line too. That sounds like fun. I have also been following along on social media. And I will say the mornings look fun, especially Friday mornings. They look like they're a fun time to be on campus. So I just really appreciate you and your perspective, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank all the students for your thorough reports and for spending your evening with us. You all just reported out how busy you are. So don't feel obligated to stay for the rest of the meeting. If you would like to leave, right now is a good time. And thank you again for joining us. With that, we are at item F3, and there are no staff reports at this time. So we are at items F4 through F6. I do not see any speaker cards for board appointed district committees, employee organizations, and other district committees. Confirming, going once. Okay. We are therefore at item F7, closed session expulsion actions. Ms. Creason.
The board voted unanimously to accept as written 3 stipulated expulsions in case numbers S03, S17, and S18. The board also voted unanimously to accept a hearing panel's recommendation of one suspended expulsion in case number S11.
Thank you, Ms. Creason. Next, we are at item G, visitor comments. We do have speaker cards for visitor comments. One moment as I pull that up. I'd like to remind the public that comments are limited to 2 minutes. The clock on the screen up here will count down the time, and under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the board is not allowed to comment on items that are not on the agenda, so we're not ignoring your comments. We just can't respond to any individual comments. The superintendent can refer items to staff who will follow up with you. With that, we will start with Norman Dates. Feel free to correct that name if I didn't say it appropriately. We're going off of just some notes, so I appreciate that. Please begin your 2 minutes when you are ready.
Good evening. I'm sure that you're aware of the FDA approval for children getting the vaccine today. Their recommendation is going to go to the ACIP committee and CDC. We all know it's all going to go through. I'm asking this board to take a minute. There are other school boards in the United States that have rejected what their state health department is asking them to do because they really have looked at the data. They really have looked at the fact that teenage boys have a 2.1 to 3.5 higher rate risk of getting myocarditis with this vaccine. What you're doing is asking those of us with teenage boys, athletes, to take a risk so that your parents and grandparents can stay alive, and it's not right. The science is there. Contact me if you want to see it. There's a lot going on, and you got your head in the sand about it, okay? We want choice so that we can make the choice for our kids. I know what my kids can handle. I know. And the mandates, I know you have to do what you have to do for this district for the money. I know the CDC is going to pay you more than what it's going to take. I know you're going to make all of us leave, and we will have to leave. We will have to take our kids out.
That's the balance of your 2 minutes. Thank you very much. Next, we have 2 written submissions. I will invite Ms. Rai to please read them. We will be timing these as well. Please proceed. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure your mic is quite on. Do a test real quick.
Test, test. There we go. Our first written comment is from Rebecca Wolfley, who writes, background, Jay Hastovic's racist comments on Facebook regarding one-day walkout by students at Casa Roble Fundamental High School. Assessment, JH is in an influential position, used very strong language condemning parents and students of community, some of which looked and sounded extremely racist, white-centric, white pride, etc. Comments were viewed on Facebook by students of JH in real time. Recommendation, number 1, termination, or at a minimum, number 2, assist JH in relocating to a community that suits his biases. 3, public apology to students, family, community. Our second written comment is from Allegra Stratton, who writes, I'm a resident with all 4 of my children under the Western Placer Unified School District. Our district adopted a resolution supporting local decision-making and requesting modifications to the proposed COVID-19 vaccination mandate for all staff and students attending California schools in person. The board has sent a letter to Governor Newsom urging him to reconsider the impact of the proposed vaccination mandate. This is a step in the right direction, and I'm very proud of our district. However, we cannot fight tyranny with a letter. We need every constituent in the state to speak up against and to demand that our parental rights not be hijacked by our government. The data that shows that is not in a state of emergency, and our children do not need this synthetic drug injection. Placer County has a total of 412 coronavirus-related deaths from the beginning of this pandemic until October 15th of this year. There have been 0 deaths in Placer County from children or anybody 17 or younger. These are our children. This is our choice. Members of the San Juan Unified School Board, please consider working with the Western Placer Unified School District in an effort to seek legal action against Governor Newsom in regards to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate. And that's all of our written comments at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. We are now at item H, the consent calendar. We do not have any speaker cards or written comments on this item. Do any of my colleagues wish to remove any items from the consent calendar at this time? Mr. Kern.
President Vasquez, I would like to note on item H8, Star King's school plan for student achievement, that under the fiscal impact section, the word district-wide should not be there. The dollar amount is listed for Star King only, not the entire district. So the item doesn't need to be pulled, just make that change.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve items H1 through H10 with the revision and as amended for H6? Moved by Ms. Creason. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Costa. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous. With that, we are at item J1, school start times for 2022-2023. Mr. Kern.
Thank you, President Vasquez, members of the board, community members and staff who are here tonight. I'm going to, if you guys want to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint, that will be helpful. Before we get started, I just want to also say we have some other members here who will be assisting me as we go along. Frank Camarda will be helping. We also have Robert and Tabitha from our transportation department who did a lot of work on these schedules. They potentially can be here to help us answer questions as well. So as soon as they get that up, we will go ahead and get started. No problem, guys.
For our viewers on the stream, we will begin in just one moment. I think we're good to go.
All right, I'm going to jump in. Okay, so tonight we are going to share information related to the school start times for 2022-2023. This discussion tonight will potentially come back for further action related to those start times. This item being brought forward to you tonight is in relation to Senate Bill 328 that was passed and signed by the governor a number of years ago related to changes in the school start time for secondary schools, with middle schools starting after 8 o'clock and high schools starting after 8:30. When we were going through this process, we talked about the impacts that would have on the whole system. And tonight really is that discussion point that we're going to be bringing forward. I wanted to provide a little bit of background even before we get into the first slides, that where we went out to the community and gathered input back in, I think it was around 2016, as we had a very extensive thought exchange going on in our community. We had over 7,300 participants. And it was interesting at the time, and it's probably similar now in terms of if we asked the community, which of these options would you like? It was very split in terms of those that favored it and those that didn't, 53 to 47%. We wanted to just share from the community voice. Early conversations just highlighted the complexity of any potential changes in terms of both system structures and individual family impacts. And we'll try and address some of those tonight. Some of the top themes that came out of that was the difficulties that could impact working families. Later start times do allow for more sleep, which is a positives. Issues that could be with transportation and drop off, and then homework, extracurricular activities, and family time were some of the themes that came out of that research. So if you gentlemen can go ahead and go to the next slide. So tonight we're going to go through a number of things, talk a little bit about the Senate bill, look at the education code, look at some of the challenges we're faced across the nation related to drivers, what we're doing around recruitment, equipment, give you an idea of the day in the life of a driver. And the reason we're doing that is because sometimes people will say, well, why don't you have it scheduled, this time, this time, this time, and this time? So we'll try and explain that. And then look at some of the factors for consideration, some past and current data, and then options. And one of the things, even before we get into this, earlier today in our workshop, we were looking at 1920 data from the last open enrollment period. We're looking at similar data because that was the last year that we were transporting how we had historically done that. 2021 looked different, so we are using that data going forward. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So this just has some background on Senate Bill 328, the Portantino bill, and the governor signed that bill in 2019. It allowed us to have an effective date as of July 1st, 2022. So that would be for the 22-23 school year. And you can see, as I mentioned before, what the start times would be affected with. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, one of the challenges that we're faced with is a national driver shortage. And I just got the recent California School Boards Association update, and there was a article in there from the president, and she quoted actually 2 districts where Elk Grove Unified had reduced from 150 to 150 routes because of shortage of drivers. Poway had reduced from 103 to 107 because of the driver shortage. It's something that we continue to face in our district. We face a workforce shortage, but actually our driver shortage has been something that we've probably been dealing with longer than some of those other workforce shortages. So just wanted to bring that forward as some information, not that that would be a deciding factor in our ultimate decision. Next slide. There's often a misunderstanding of really all that goes into becoming a bus driver. So we laid out the amount of training that they really have to go through and the testing. And so I know that our transportation department as well as HR are constantly in the process of trying to recruit drivers. We're going to show a slide here in a minute about some of the things we've tried to done to recruit. But Robert and his team are always out there trying to bring in more and more drivers. We are actually looking at even some alternatives in the future. Could we transport utilizing vans, which would have lesser requirements than this? So we're looking at some creative solutions down the road that could help us as well. Next slide. This slide just speaks to some of our efforts. We had a hiring event on Wednesday, October 13th. We've been providing a signing bonus, advertising where we can. And again, we want to do everything we can. You do have some challenges when you look at some of the other local transportation options for people. When you look at our drivers having a split day rather than just working straight 8s, that creates challenges for some folks. But we continue along with others in the region to be actively recruiting more bus drivers. Next slide. Along with a challenge related to our drivers, when we look at our fleet, we currently have 70 buses that are past their useful life. And let me explain what this is. It's almost like your car. You can drive it more years than you probably can get out of it. But at some point, the maintenance cost may exceed the value to driving that. We have some buses that are on the road that I think ended their useful life, Robert, like 2009, 10. And so each of those years, we've had buses that if we had been replacing those, they would have termed out at that point. We've always tried to extend our buses beyond that period of time. But we are at a point where we will be looking at how we can utilize some one-time funds to replenish some of our buses so that we don't get to the point where our fleet is become such a burden on us. I do know that we recently had a grant where we are going to get, it's 10, Frank, 10 electric buses. You can see the average cost of a new bus at the bottom there is at $175,000. The cost for an electric bus is $395,000. So significantly more for an electric bus versus the regular buses. Next slide, please. So we really wanted to lay this out. And this is the piece, when you look at a schedule, some folks would say, why don't you just start the day at 8 and then go 8:15, 8:30, 8:45, we're good to go, we're done. When you look at this and we see the driver starts at 6, they leave, and at 6:15, they start to pick up students. They're dropping off students at 7:45. So at that point, the driver then is moving on to pick up another group of students to drop off at a school that starts at a later time in the day. If we bunched up our schedule too much, we wouldn't be able to utilize those drivers for kind of these double routes. And then we would even need more and more drivers. So this is something we've historically done. Routing a transportation department is a very, very challenging task to do. It changes year to year based on the needs of our students in our community. So we just kind of wanted to lay that out so folks would understand that as well. All right, next slide. So the factors that we took into consideration, and this item came to cabinet on 3 occasions, really asking Robert and his team to identify what would be the most efficient. We looked at that, provided some feedback, came back with a second option, provided some more feedback, came back with another option, and that's what we'll be presenting to you today. But we looked at that idea of supporting routing across divisions. That's kind of that providing more than one driver per division per route. Consistent start times, what they potentially allow is greater efficiency. There are cost savings. Last board meeting, when we were talking about K-8s, and we shared, well, it'd be great if a K-8 student could take like a virtual course at another school. Well, currently our schools don't line up in the same start times. So we could be teaching a particular course, let's say Spanish at a K-8 or an advanced math class at a K-8, but the times don't match up. So that doesn't allow us to do things like that. So the fact that our start times are all over the place minimize the creativity we could do. Even Dr. McKibben, as you mentioned earlier in the board workshop today about doing some virtual learning, that limits that. And then impact to families. And when I say families, I include families, staff, working staff members, all members at our sites. What would be the impact to those with a later or earlier start times? And so at the end of this, we're going to go into some of what we think the potential impacts of each of these options will be. So first, we'll walk through each of these options. Next slide. So this is the past and current data. I mentioned we're looking at the 1920 data. That's when we had 1,293 students. The vast majority of those are students with IEPs. There are some small groups where we do transport siblings, or if we're overloading where we can, we'll transport those as well. This year, we're down significantly in the number of students, which means we have less routes. That is because we've had students choose not to go back, probably a higher number, as we have some medically fragile students or other students that we had historically been transporting. Those students are staying home this year. We believe that when we get back and when we look at future years, we're still using that almost 1,300 student number as kind of our baseline to make our calculations. It could be less, it could be more. It's really based on the needs of the community, declining enrollment, and a number of other things. We still, our baseline that we kind of have built in to transportation is around 100 routes. It fluctuates up and down a little bit each year. Again, based on where the students are coming from, where the program is. So when we think about 100 routes, that's really what we've had budgeted. We're only needing to utilize 74 this year. And then we show the average cost of the route. The reason that fluctuates the way that it does is if we have to outsource some of those routes if we don't have the necessary number of workforce drivers in-house, those routes from the outside are actually more expensive than our routes. All right, if you'd go to the next slide. So we're providing to you tonight 3 options. The first option is maximum efficiency. It is providing, we're looking at the same number again. It would be 84 routes. We would need some additional drivers over what we currently have. You see the projected cost there. In this model, and I'm going to give you more specifics at the end. I'm going to kind of compare all 3 of these. School start times would change between 10 minutes and an hour and 10 minutes. So pretty big change for some schools. And there would be future cost savings in this model. Now, you also have the matrix in each of these of the breakdown. So hopefully the board has been able to look at that and study that closely. Next slide. Option B would require 20 more routes. So we'd need some additional drivers. It really would be around what we currently have budgeted for the last couple of years, in that around 100 route range. Ultimately, we wouldn't know, and Tabitha shared this with Cabinet the other day, we wouldn't know exactly how many routes we need next year until we actually route the students for next year. But we're trying to be as specific as we can for this time. School times wouldn't change quite as drastically, from 0 minutes to 45 minutes, and it really is cost neutral to the district over what we have budgeted. Next slide. The last option is option C. And what we asked for in this option is, what would it look like if we didn't change the elementary school start times? Because the law really states you need to change your secondary start times to 8 and 8:30. You can see there we would need significantly more routes. The cost goes up a couple of $1 million. As I mentioned, we leave the elementary school start times the same. The changes would be between 0 and 35 minutes. And I would say that if this option were to be chosen, as these are ongoing costs that we would have to build into the budget, and in out years, after Ms. Stahlheber did her presentation on the board previously, these numbers are not built into out year budgets. So we would have to come back and actually have a conversation about where are we going to make cuts in out year budgets to pay for the increased cost of this. Now, one of the things that I want to share with you is, when we look at potential impacts of these, so this is where, what could be the challenges that we face in each of these. The fiscal impact varies, as we've mentioned. Option A realizes cost savings. B is neutral. There is some increased cost to option C. More routes have the potential to exacerbate the bus driver shortage. The greater the start time change, differences between current times and proposed start times, the greater the impact to staff, families, and students. So in option C, it has the least amount of change, but greatest cost and routes to staff. Option B has some change ranging from 0 to 45 minutes. There are 7 schools that have start times changing from 35 to 45 minutes, 22 schools from 20 to 30 minutes, and 31 schools have start time changes by 15 minutes or fewer. Option A has the most change, ranging from 10 minutes, as I mentioned, to an hour and 10 minutes. 28 schools have times changing by 45 minutes to 1 hour and 10 minutes. 20 schools have start times changing by 25 to 40 minutes, and 12 schools have start times changing by 20 minutes or fewer. Just a point to note here, the greater the change between current start times and the proposed start time, the greater the impacts to staff, families, and students. We know that there will potentially be, in any of these changes that take place, employee childcare needs as work hour shift. A big one will be before and after school supervision of students. Parents will likely still need to drop off, pick up students at times that are already built within their current routine. So when you have later start times, it's likely parents will drop the kids off. That's convenient for them when they go to work. How do we provide the supports necessary for those students? And then the more consistent our start times are across the system, the more accessible our system is to programs that require transportation. We historically have had some schools that have not had transportation to them. And it's somewhat because of the start times that they are. So even if we had a community that had an influx of students, we may not be able to build that into our start time schedule just based on all the other programs. because there are times where we shift programs from school to school. It will happen every couple of years just based on a number of items. So those are some of the points that we've looked at and thought about. We wanted to bring this to the board tonight, hear your thoughts after digging into the attachment as well. And from there, you can go to the last slide and we will take questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Kern. We do not have any speaker cards or written comments on this item. So I'm going to turn it to my colleagues for questions and comments. Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Kern, for the report and the staff who prepared it. Just a quick question. So I'm just going to use option B for my questions, just to give you an example. In option B, we're going to add 13 or try to add 13 additional bus drivers. Is that correct?
I think option B is we're saying we have 74, we'd go to 104, so we'd need 30. I don't know, Robert, exactly. And if you could come to the mic on this.
Well, so as Robert's coming up, let's assume that I was right. That we're going to add 30 additional bus drivers.
Oh, 30.
I heard 13 too.
Oh,
Did I say 13?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I meant
30.
30,
30.
30. Not enough candy, 30. And based on the cost, each additional route, because we're going to add 30 more routes than we currently have, that would be an increase of $3 million roughly at $100,000 a route, right? My question is that, I understand we have to do something, but if we're having a shortage as we are finding bus drivers, how in the world are we going to find 30 or let alone 50 or even 10?
so I'll let Robert address that.
Yeah, it's definitely a catch-22. So we are right now putting in different plans in order to try to recruit drivers by doing some of these job fairs. We do have hold orientations monthly. And out of that, we bring some of those people in to actually have them become potential drivers. Now, it takes about 6 weeks to a couple months to get people through the program. So my guess is that between now and the start of next year is that my hope is that we could get maybe 20 drivers. I can't control who might leave, but if we can go 20, use supplemental services, potentially put in a van program, we might be able to make that up. On top of that, we're not sure that we will get to that 1,300 students. So having that into effect, and that's an unknown, of course, we may not need to get right to that 104. It may give us some chance to grow to that point.
So Robert, if the option that we adopt would be a factor based on what's realistic of what we can possibly get. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is it realistic that if we choose option B, that we can get close to 30? Is that a number that, pretty good number?
I don't think that we could get to 30 just based on the time, but I do believe that we could get to 20. And say that we lose 5 drivers by attrition, that brings us down to 15. We will have to, go to supplemental services
So
to be able to.
based on what you just said, is an option C thrown out the window then? Because we're looking at 50 for that option C.
Yeah, in my opinion, if you were to ask me that, my
I
professional
am.
opinion, it's would almost be impossible with the driver shortage. Yes.
Okay. I appreciate your honesty. Thank you so much.
One of the other things that affects routes, and we try and limit the amount of time that individuals spend on a bus, but you could expend ride time as well. So, if let's say we have a goal of no student being on the bus and for 45 minutes. Well, if we said, okay, a driver could pick up another 2 students, students may be on the bus more, but that can reduce the number of routes. So there's a number of other factors that they could consider and look at. And really, again, it'll be interesting to see if we get back to that 1920 number. We might not for a variety of reasons, but we have to use the data that we have. And that's the last useful information we have.
Ms. Costa? Okay, I wasn't sure. Oh, I didn't see there was microphones in the way. Please
Okay.
proceed.
When I analyzed the data a little differently than you did, and I used 30 minutes, a change of 30 minutes or more when I looked at the 3
significant.
plans.
Yeah.
And so with option A, 27 elementary schools, 1 special ed school, 9 middle schools, and 3 high schools for a total of 40 schools would be impacted by 30 minutes or more with the schedule change. And so that to me was very disruptive to the system. So I eliminated option A. Then I looked at option B. 14 elementary schools were impacted by 30 minutes or more, 1 special ed school, 0 middle schools, 3 high schools for a total of 18 schools. And I called you about the 30 additional drivers because I thought, is that even humanly possible? And you told me you thought it was possible. And the fact that it's cost neutral made me feel much better. I looked at option C and I thought, if we lived in a perfect world with unlimited money forever, that would be my favorite because it doesn't change anybody's start time. But we don't live in a perfect world. I think the chances of finding 50 additional bus drivers is near impossible. And the cost increase, I think, would mean we would start making cuts that I personally couldn't live with. So I eliminated C. So with that, I think option B for me is the option that's most tenable right now. I am wondering, or I started wondering as I was listening, we haven't talked about the fact that this has to be negotiated. The high school time and the middle school time doesn't because it's a fact of law. But elementary with the contract is any change of more than
5 minutes.
5 minutes, I'm thinking, has to be negotiated. So that's another factor in here that we haven't even started to address.
Yeah, we haven't addressed it here. I will share with you that we have tried to have conversations. We actually brought this item forward now because we wanted to bring it forward as early as we can, because this could, as we had the conversation about open enrollment earlier today in the workshop, could affect a choice a parent makes
Definitely.
based on, I need to drop my student off at this particular time or this particular time. So our hopes is that we could come back to this at the first meeting in November. If we've been unable to really work through that piece of it, that could delay it and result in it coming back at a later date, possibly December or later. I'm hopeful that some of the logic that you have shared, is also understood by others. And so, but the conversation has started, and we're gonna, once we have this dialogue tonight, the documentation has been shared with the association leadership. We'll be sitting down and working through that with them.
And I would agree with you as a parent, the start time would be extremely important to me. And the ending time would be extremely important to me in making a decision about where my child went to school, if it affected childcare and all the other things that are involved. So I think the sooner we can make a decision, the better for our families.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Ms. Creason.
Thank you. First, I want to go way back. Superintendent Kern, did I hear you say correctly that a regular bus is 175,000 and an electric's 195?
395.
That's a big, I was like, 20,000 isn't that big of a deal, but that's a very big
220.
deal. Okay. Okay, thank you. That makes a lot more sense. So if I understand correctly, the reason to not, if we were to not do option A, the biggest challenge would be the wide variety in the change of start times across the board. Is that what I'm hearing is the main reason not to do A?
Well, I
could
would
have worded
say,
that
I would
better.
say that if when you look at when we take into consideration families, that would be the most disruptive because you see more significant swings in start times. And that will be challenging. And I think that's where, if the board were to choose option A, and you historically had started school at 8:05 and now you're at 8:55, you might go, I don't know if I can continue this. And those are the challenges that would come into play.
So I have some thoughts about that mindset, but that would be the one. Is there, I guess what I'm getting at, is there any other huge red flag with option A beyond that concern?
I don't think so. I think it is the most efficient. From a transportation department lens, it's the best option. And there's a reason why we actually, when we were looking at this through cabinet, is Robert and Frank and his team, they put together this presentation. But I said, Frank, we actually want to present this through a school's lens because the impacts are really, they're on their department, but ultimately it affects our families and our staff and our students. So, that's where we'll hear about it from. So that is the biggest impact. What will be the impacts on the schools?
Understood. I appreciate that. And I think that my thought process is a little different. I mean, to me, we've come out of the most disruptive period ever, coming out of COVID and hybrid and distance learning, and people figured it out. And so I don't, for me, A is not off the table when I think about conversations I've had with parents and decisions I've made about school. I have never looked at school start and stop time as an enrollment factor, never once. And I've never heard anyone else say that. Now, not to say people don't do that, but that's not, when I do have conversations with folks, that's not what bubbles up as the priority. Not to dismiss, I mean, it's huge. It's a huge change and I'm not trying to minimize it, but regardless, it's going to be a big change, no matter what option we go with. So for me, option A isn't off the table for that one reason. And I do recognize that before and after care changes, absolutely. But I think that, and I know now is not the time to brainstorm that, but it's either either you need care at the front or the end for the most part, if you need childcare. And if we're shifting the times with appropriate notice and time and resources and support, I'm confident we can help folks with that change. So for all those reasons, A is not off the table for me. I wanted to also call out too, and not in a negative way at all, because it makes a whole lot of sense why bus schedule impacts what we're going to do here 100%. But I could see somebody that doesn't use the bus system and they see the title of this item is school start times, and this is very focused on transportation and buses, and if someone's listening in or reads the minutes later, they might be a little confused why this is. I mean, even the slides are just buses, right? So could you just share for the record for folks that might be like, why is it all about buses? Because it makes a whole lot of sense. It's a huge factor, a variable in all this decision-making. So I get that. But and I know we touched on it in a few slides in the back, but can you share who does receive bus services, maybe the percentage around about? And we could go back to the actual number of kids receiving that services in here, but just to give folks an idea of who we're talking about.
Not all students with IEPs receive transportation because some students go to their home school based on the programs that are there. The percentage, I think, Robert, do you know that?
Well, I mean, we had 1,300 students and we have 40,000.
But the percentage of special ed is, Deborah, do you know off the top of your head? No, I think it's less.
She was saying 3% that we transport.
No, let us get back to you on the specifics on that, because I know our special education rate, I think, is around 11 or 12%, which would be about 4,500. And so 1,300 of the 4,500 receive transportation. And I completely understand when this bill was being floated, a lot of the arguments that we're now talking about is exactly why we said it would be challenging, because small percentages of students being transported. We talked about it, potentially increasing costs. We talked about that it's going to require a shift for all schools unless you wanted to see significant increase in costs. And those are realities. And so I think really tonight, what we had to show was that start times are, I remember a conversation when I was a teacher at Will Rogers, frustrated about start times, and it was, the dog that wagged the tail. The reality is We have to, this is our transportation hugely impacts start and end times because we are required to transport these students, and happily so do we do it. And so that's what we're building these start and end times around.
No, I appreciate it. It wasn't my intent to put anyone on the spot with
You didn't.
numbers. It was just to make the point. I could see why someone could be confused, like what is one? It has a whole lot to do with the other. And
Yep.
I don't want to minimize, I hope nothing I said minimized that fact. I just wanted to raise it because I could see, I get it. This is coming back, right? So we have some more time to talk about, but we're gonna want to the goal is to make a decision by the end of the year so we give folks as much notice as possible with where we're going to be going next school year.
Well, the goal would be to make the decision at one of the next two board meetings
Mhm.
prior to open enrollment taking place. Open enrollment starts December 6th. So we'd either need to bring it back at the next meeting, and really, we will take, based on what we hear tonight, I will need to make a recommendation back to the board on one of these.
Okay.
Again, listening to, there are pros and cons to each of these. If we had brought back, if I had brought just one option forward tonight, the reality would have been, well, what about if we did this or we did this? So we kind of tried to show here's where our options are. They could put out there another 30 options.
Mhm.
They're all going to have some pros and cons to it.
Thanks for not doing that.
Yeah. So I think at this point, and one of the things we even talked about, okay, there are some of those schools that don't have transportation right now. What if you left them alone? Well, historically, they haven't had transportation because they don't fit into the system. This is an opportunity for us to actually have somewhat of a unified system in the district. How many of you, when you go to visit schools, the first thing you check on is, oh, when does the school start? I've shown up at schools that, I get there at 7:45. Oh, they don't start till 8:45. I check the start times I'm speaking to elementary schools, of when they start, because there's such a broad band. At least there would be some consistency. And I
continuity,
think
yeah.
going forward, that consistency would allow us as a system to be more efficient for offering programmatic things like Dr. McKibben was talking about earlier tonight.
Yep, I agree. I think the consistency and what to expect would be great for everybody in the system. That's it for me for now.
Dr. McKibben.
When this was being debated, one of the things that was the plea of most of the urban and suburban school districts had to do with this is a local control issue. And we can find a way to do what you want to do by looking at our own conditions and working on that. And that wasn't a compelling argument for the sponsors and so forth. But I want to congratulate you for offering us 3 local control kinds of options for us to look at so that we can at least have some feeling of control over this when in fact that was being ignored before. I want to check on the 3 different options and some of the things, and you alluded to it earlier. I still remember the story that you told when you was it at Carnegie and children were being dropped off a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour before school starts, because that's when they had to go to work and drop those off. And we've always talked about providing some kind of supervision of those students both before and after school. And that as a possibility, particularly as we're increasing the hours and so forth related to our instructional aides and so forth. In your costs for A, B, and C, is the figure for providing that kind of supervision in those numbers, or would that be in addition to that?
That would be in addition to that.
Okay, so those are not figured into your cost neutral and so forth. But it's something that I think that we've been talking about for some time, and I think this would, frankly, in good conscience, we need to do that.
Yeah, Ms. Bassnell, do you want to speak to that? Because you talked about part of this will be figuring out one of the next steps that when we go out and we communicate this to the community, can you, I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, when we land on what action is going to be taken, our next step needs to be to work with each school and community to discuss what are the impacts related to this shift, because the shift varies across school site. And we need to be really intentional around those conversations within the school community to build a system of support based off of their needs. There may be schools that have very minimal impact in terms of before school supervision. And then there may be other schools that have large impacts where we need to think about how we can, as a system, provide some supports around the supervision needs that will probably likely exist at some of the schools. So our intention is to respond in terms of outreach around impact so that we can then be responsive as a system and build supports.
The other cost that when we were talking about the increase of bus drivers, I recall, and it's been a while since I've done it, that I did ride-alongs with the bus drivers and so forth, and was very impressed with the work that they did. But I also recall that most of those buses had aides, particularly
Attendance.
of some kind that helped, particularly for those that had gurneys and that sort of thing. So in addition to bus drivers, it would seem to me that we would have to increase the number of attendants. Is that number included in this figure?
Yeah, well, I believe the routes are, we have a budget. If we were providing 100, let's say 100 to 104 routes, that's our transportation costs. But the question would be, Robert, do you know what percentage of our routes actually have attendance on them?
Uh, 7%.
7%?
7%.
Okay, so it's not that many then. All right. Okay, and then finally, my last question, and this is the dumb question of the day. The Commission on State Mandates actually is mentioned in this law. And it was mentioned in the law because virtually everybody that stood up to oppose this talked about it being an additional cost. And I think we can still argue that it is an additional cost. When was the last time that the state actually paid for a state mandate?
Yeah, please.
Well, that they actually paid a mandate was quite some time ago. They paid down their mandate obligations through one-time funds when Brown was still governor. So when he had extra funds in budget, he used those, gave them to all districts, but then cleared his debt to the districts that they still owed.
As a one-time cost, not an ongoing,
Yes.
not really valuing the ongoing mandates that we've had to pick up.
Right.
So if we submitted our excess costs of $2 million or something to state mandates, the chances are slim and none, and Slim just left town?
Most likely, yes.
Most likely.
Yeah.
Okay. I had to say that. That was, so it appears to me that, and because we're not likely to get the kinds of bus drivers that we need, that fewer people are inconvenienced that of the three choices, and none of them are really good choices. It seems like B is the best of the worst choices.
Ms. Creason?
I'm sorry I didn't catch this on my own earlier, but something I noticed and I wanted to ask about, and I'll stick to the script. Okay, so I'm surprised that in both options A and B, elementary schools in some scenarios are starting later than junior high and high school, which I believe the intent is pretty much the exact opposite. So I'm just wondering, how did it shake out like that?
Well, we've always had a number of elementary schools that have started later. When you look at, like there's a group, Cameron Ranch, 8:40, Carmichael, 8:40, Carriage, 8:30, Cottage, 8:45. You go there, their current start time is actually already later. The law says that 8 o'clock and 8:30. Option A has all of the middle and K-8s moving to 8:55. That's why you see such a large change. That would be a change of an hour and 10 minutes for some of those schools. So that was, in theory, the most economically efficient option to bring about. And the reason why option B has less movement than A is because you have, I think, Ms. Costa, you said there was 21. What was the number of elementary schools that moved? Because this, I think that's telling in.
14 elementary schools moved 30 minutes.
You want to try?
Yeah, because
Okay. In A, 27 elementary schools or K-8s moved 30 minutes or more. In option B, 14 elementary or K-8s moved 30 minutes or more. So it's a reduction of almost half between A and B.
Yeah, I don't think the intent was never to make sure that all secondary schools started later than elementary schools. I think if they would have done that, they would have said 8:30 and 9. Because historically, you've had some elementary schools starting in that later half. I don't know. I mean, we talked about the impacts on families with later elementary school start times, but historically, our elementary schools are the ones that have started the latest.
Understood. And I guess it's just not to say that there's anything to be done about it. I think what's surprising to me though, and you're right, it's not in the legislation. My prior organization, MHAC, was a very proud supporter. We worked very closely with the author of the bill. The whole thought process was older kids need more sleep, which then the late start time. So it took me a second just to see it in the dot. And I'm sorry, just looking at the colors and the numbers that, oh, well, that's interesting. We still have elementary kids starting later, when the thought process was just more sleep for older kids and later sleep. Not to say there's anything to be done there, but I think that was a little surprising.
I think if we were to, I mean, when you see that whole block at the bottom, there's a lot of 8:40, 8:40, 8:45, 8:45, 45, 35, 45, 45, 40, 35. That to swing those the other way, that what's the impact on those families and those communities that have been working within that time frame for a long period of time, and for whatever reason that's worked for them. Now, yeah, your question earlier is interesting to say, people have been willing to change for a variety of things during the pandemic. What would it look like if we had significant changes, both ways on this? I don't know.
I don't either, but thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? When I kind of started looking at this, I think it's interesting to just see how we all analyzed it in our own thought processes. But I tried to come from a working family's perspective and just concluded that there's really not a good option for working families. Like, the fact of the matter is, people have shifts, they start early. And as one of the kids that was just dropped off really early and in the dark in winter times, that's, families do what they need to make it work. And so then I kind of moved to, well, what offers just a little bit more consistency. And I know I did look at option A, and just the larger margins of shifts, right? And the difference, the 1 hour and 5 minutes, just seemed like a really big swing for sites to have to figure out how to accommodate. And then there's also 20, maybe I didn't write down that right, but I think there's 23 sites in this option A that now start at 7:40, and every one of those is earlier. And that seems rough no matter what grade level you're at. I mean, I know the intent of the law was for older kids, but moving, from 8:15 to 7:40 at the elementary school level, it just also seemed pretty disruptive. I also just wanted to kind of comment too on how like we went from start time to transportation. It's a little bit just weird, but also a little bit, I don't know, frustrating. I wish we had more capacity to offer more transportation, and we don't. And we already see here just in the options laid out that like we're struggling to meet the needs that we currently have. When looking, I just keep landing at option B. The threshold that I determined was a significant disruption. I didn't pick 30 minutes. I picked 45 minutes. Actually, I picked 40 minutes. And so in option B, the shift of 40 to 45 minutes is limited to, 5 sites, but I also have not worked at a site. So I would defer to Ms. Costa's judgment on that and appreciate you sharing, your thoughts and your opinions there too. And then I kind of consider the blocks of time. So, for folks at home, we're mostly looking at attachment B, this like rainbow color coded chart with a lot of different segments on it. And just the consistency alone on kind of the chunks of time, 7:45, 8 o'clock, 8:55, and 8:30. It seems like if then we made it a priority to offer some kind of supervision or care, which I think we would need to, it would just be easier as a system to do that with more consistent start times. So after kind of going all over the place, I tend to land on option B as sort of a preference of not a lot of great decisions or choices to choose from. That being said, I do appreciate all the work that went into it. I know from the beginning, this was kind of, raised as a concern. So
Can I make one more statement? I think one of the interesting things it's a little disappointing to me tonight to look on the YouTube feed and see 35 people watching right now. 34 because I logged in, so I'm one of them. To see very little folks here in the audience, but what's going to happen is after we make this decision, we're going to hear from a lot of people about what they didn't like and the impacts of it. And, we communicated with our Superintendent's Parents Advisory Committee that this was coming forward. We've been trying to get that out there to our other committees. And I wished we could have actually had more comments tonight from folks before we get to a decision point. But, we are where we are because I know we are going to hear from folks once they find out that this is, I will say, in having this conversation with our principals and specifically our secondary folks knew this was coming. Okay. They knew it was coming. They knew the impacts, but you're an elementary school principal and you really don't know. And I'm not going to ask you to come to the mic, Amberly, but as you had this conversation with your principals, they were very supportive and understanding. And I think even to the point that Ms. Bassinelli went to, like, okay, once we know, how do we start that conversation? And I appreciate the way that you said that so much with identifying what are the needs of each of our individual communities. Because I think we will then, as we look towards next year, say, here's the impact. How do we provide more resources at the school site level to provide a before or an after school type of program?
Thank you, Superintendent Kern. Before I kind of move on or kind of wrap us up, I also just wanted to ask a couple of questions kind of on the workforce side of this. I mean, I'm making some assumptions, but in terms of the training, the background testing, all of that, we currently pay for that, or is that correct? I'm seeing some nodding indicating yes. Because I do wonder, I mean, look, we've had discussions and there was an option here where it was like, oh, that's the perfect option because it meets our workforce that we have right now, right? So no matter what, we're kind of in a hard spot. But I keep thinking to how we can kind of spread the word. And I know we've offered stipends for our bus drivers and some other items. I imagine we'll continue to try to get creative on that. You know, I'm sure we'll be working in partnership with our bargaining partners, all impacted bargaining partners to meet those needs. And it just seems like option B is the closest, it's kind of like the closest reasonable goal that we can make. I want to see if there's any other additional comments at this time on this item. It is a discussion item and we'll bring it back in the future. Mr. Hernandez.
Ms. Vasquez, in lieu of the fact that we only meet once in November and once in December, I mean, as a board meeting, and we need to make a decision before, you said the middle of December, is that what you said? Should we not give our superintendent direction now to prepare recommendation for our next board meeting?
Well, what I've heard is that, I mean, based on the conversation, it will return for action. I think the timing was dependent on some conversations with our labor partners, but we can say we want it to come back in November unless something happens.
Mr. Hernandez, I'll say this. I think both, based on the conversation that has happened on the dais here, I think you have provided direction for staff to make a recommendation. And then at that point, the board can choose to vote the direction that they like on that item. So, and if for some reason I bring something back and the board votes against that, then someone can make a motion for another option. So I think there's been clear enough conversation to provide myself and staff with what we need.
Or let me just go on record and say that I support option B as well, okay? Because I don't think I did the first time. Thank you.
Ms. Vasquez, before, I just want to say thank you to Robert and Tabitha and Frank. This is a really heavy lift. And we're actually, I think we're out in front of most districts on this. I've been asking, hey, when are you going to bring this forward? And everybody's kind of just like, oh, we really don't want to do this. So let's just, it's for another day. So, we've been talking about this for a long time. You guys really did a lot of work even this summer on this. It does take a lot of work. So I just want to personally thank you. Whatever the outcome is, you provided the board information for them to make a decision. So we appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions or comments. And so this was agendized as a discussion item. It will return for action at a later date. Thank you. With that, we are at item J2, ESSER 3 expenditure plan. Ms. Bassanelli.
Good evening. School districts receiving elementary and secondary emergency relief funds under the American Rescue Plan Act, referred to as ESSER 3 funds, are required to develop a plan on how they will use funds at minimum to address students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs, as well as opportunity gaps that existed before and were exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The plan must be adopted by the local governing board at a public meeting on or before October 29th, 2021, and must be submitted for review and approval to the County Office of Education within 5 days of adoption. After extensive community engagement and staff input, San Juan Unified School District's ESSER 3 expenditure plan was presented to the Board of Education for discussion on October 12th, 2021, and is before the board tonight for action. I'm available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Bassanelli. We do not have any cards or written comments on this item. This was presented to us at our last meeting for discussion, and it's now here as an action item, but there's still time for further questions or comments. Do any of my colleagues have additional questions or comments at this time? All right. Is there a motion to approve the ESSER? Oh, I paused too. Oh, wait, are you moving or are you comment? Oh, I was ready to pause. Okay, I'm going to finish the motion first, but I'll jump to you. Is there a motion to approve the ESSER 3 expenditure plan?
So moved.
It's been moved by Dr. McKibben. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Ms. Costa. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous. We're getting a little goofy up here. We're at item J3, conveyance of permanent easement at Mesa Verde High School. Mr. Camarda.
Thank you, President Villescaz, board members, Superintendent Kern, Ms. Cunningham. The superintendent is recommending that the board call a public hearing in order to solicit public comment and adopt resolution number 3083, declaring the conveyance of a permanent easement at Mesa Verde High School to the Citrus Heights Water Department.
I declare the topic of conveying one permanent easement at Mesa Verde High School to the Citrus Heights Water District a public hearing, and it is now open for public comment. We do not have any speaker comments or written comments on this item. I do not see anybody wishing to make public comment at this time. So there being no comments, I declare the public hearing closed. Do any board members have questions or comments? Seeing none. This was discussed at our September 28th meeting and is now an action item. Is there a motion to adopt resolution number 3083 conveying one permanent easement at Mesa Verde High School to the Citrus Heights Water District? It's been moved by Mr. Hernandez and seconded by Ms. Creason. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. That was unanimous. Aye, that was unanimous. We are at item J4, conveyance of temporary easement at Mesa Verde High School. Mr. Camarda.
Thank you again, President Villescaz. Again, the superintendent is recommending that the board call a public hearing in order to solicit public comment and adopt resolution number 3085, declaring the conveyance of a temporary easement at Mesa Verde High School to the Citrus Heights Water Department.
Thank you. I declare the topic of conveying one temporary easement at Mesa Verde High School to the Citrus Heights Water District a public hearing, and it is now open for public comment. There are no public comment cards or written comments at this item, and there are no comments here in the boardroom, so I declare the public hearing closed. Do any board members have questions or comments at this time? Seeing none, this was a discussion item at our September 28th meeting, and it is now before us for action. Is there a motion to adopt resolution number 3085, conveying a temporary easement at Mesa Verde High School to the Citrus Heights Water District? Been moved by Ms. Costa. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Dr. McKibben. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous. We are now
you.
at item J5, variable term waivers. Mr. Oropolo.
Good evening, President Villescaz, board members, Superintendent Kern, Ms. Cunningham. We're here tonight to present the superintendent's recommendation that the governing board approve the submission of 7 variable term waivers to the California Commission on Teaching and Credential. And I here can answer any questions that you may have. This is an action item.
Thank you, Mr. Oropolo. We do not have any speaker cards or written comments on this item. Do any of my colleagues have questions or comments on this item? Dr. McKibben.
Mr. O'Powell, thank you for responding to the questions that I had earlier. That I think that you've answered all those questions, and the support that you're providing to these people is what they need. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for your leadership on that, Dr. McKibben. I thought the ability to look at these things through the lens of success in the future is important for our teachers, and I appreciate it.
Seeing no further comments or questions, this is an action item. Is there a motion to approve the submission of 7 variable term waivers to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing? Been moved by Ms. Creason. Is there a second?
Second.
And seconded by Dr. McKibben. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous. We are at item J6, assignment of teachers outside regular based credential. Mr. Oropolo.
Thank you, President Villescaz. I'm here tonight to present superintendent's recommendation that the governing board adopt resolution number 3088, authorizing the assignment of certificated employees to outside of their authorized credential areas for 21-22 for education code 44256B, 44258.2, 44263, and 44865. Again, this is an action item, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Oropolo. We do not have any speaker comments or written comments on this item. Do any of my colleagues have questions or comments at this time? Seeing none. This is an action item. Is there a motion to adopt resolution number 3088, authorizing the assignment of certificated employees to areas outside their authorized credential during the 2021-2022 school year? It's been moved by Ms. Costa. Is there a second? Y'all are doing that on purpose. Mr. Hernandez seconds. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous. We're at item J7, provisional internship permit. Mr. Orapollo.
Thank you, President Villesquez. I'm here tonight to present superintendent's recommendation that the governing board approve the submission of one provisional internship permit to the California Commission on Teaching Credentialing effective 8/10/21 through 6/30/22. And again, I can answer any questions, and this is an action item.
Thank you, Mr. Orapollo. We do not have any speaker cards or written comments on this item. Do any of my colleagues have questions or comments at this time? Seeing none. This is an action item. Is there a motion to approve the submission of one provisional internship permit to the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing? Ms. Costa moves. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Dr. McKibben. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, that was unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Orapollo. Thank you as well to my colleagues for hanging in there. We are at item K, board reports. Do we have any board reports this evening? Dr. McKibben.
Wanted to report that on Friday at noon, I attended and I've lost the name, the early academic outreach program at Mira Loma with the University of California, Davis. The director, executive director of admissions made a presentation to about 50 students from Mira Loma, and it was really interesting to listen to him, to listen to their questions and so forth as they get ready for their next step and that sort of thing. And we appreciate the partnership with University of California, Davis.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben, for your report. I'm really glad to hear that you were able to make it. I was very, very sad to not be able to make it at the last minute, but I know that a lot of preparation went into that. And I know that the site was very, very happy with the turnout. So I'm glad you could make it and represent the team. I only have one item that I wanted to report out, which was on October 14th, I got to participate. It's one of the few parts where like my dual identities merged. I'm not talking about the personality crisis that I sometimes have, but we're going to keep going. I got to present as a school board member at the California Welfare Directors Association conference. So it was to a group of judges, county human services directors, social workers, etc., around the intersection of education and placements and the child welfare system. Oftentimes these systems are just very, very siloed, and you have the child welfare system out there doing their best to serve kids, but really just engaging the education system when they need their foster youth to catch up on credit so that they can graduate them, right? And so, and similarly, like they just don't have an awareness of the education side. I was able to partner with two other colleagues, a school board member from Washington Unified, and then a school board member from the Alameda County Office of Education as well. And we're doing kind of the same roadshow to the National School Board Associations to kind of cross blend these cohorts and have the conversation, but really all get aimed at making sure that the systems can talk to each other as best they can to better meet the needs of our students. So it was fun and well received. It was fun to be able to go speak education to a bunch of human services folks and bridge that gap. And that was all I wanted to report out this time. Seeing no further board reports, we are, wait, I did have one more board report. Sorry, I'm going to take a moment to celebrate, like it's been brought up at meetings, etc., but I just want to at least acknowledge, and I will do this on my own behalf, the petitions to recall the 5 of us failed. And I, for one, do think that it is, I'm going to take that as an indication that we are doing a good job. In fact, we're doing a great job. I don't know if we need all that, but we're all still here. I won't go much further than that, but good job, team. We'll keep it up. And then finally, I'm also working with Ms. Creason on kind of a COVID town hall to answer questions, and I'm excited to have my former colleague, Dr. Erica Pan, our state epidemiologist, join us. We landed on the 9th, Tuesday the 9th, at 5 p.m. Visit our various platforms for that, but I'm excited to be partnering on that. It is not an official district event, that's correct, but it's still something that we are putting on together. We are now at item L, future agenda items. Do any board members wish to add any items to the future agenda? Okay. Seeing none, we're at item M, visitor comments. We do not have any speaker cards or written comments at this time. I want to confirm that. Okay, and then before we adjourn, should just say, as I was acknowledging kind of the recall and saying we're doing a great job, really, it's a full team effort. Thanks to the staff who hung in there too. I'm sure the noise will not end. I don't want to jinx anything, but it was actually a pretty quiet evening. I know that'll come to bite me in the. Thank you. We're a team. I appreciate everyone. We appreciate you. Have a great evening. We do not need to return to closed session. We are adjourned.